Mangabe kuthiwa ubuhle bendoda izinkomo zakhe, asikhulumi ngobuhle bakhe in the sense of wealth.
Yeah.
Because even that's now been distorted. We're talking about ubuhle bakhe in the sense of the kind of responsibility he's able to carry. In a space like marriage where you're given an opportunity to start your own tribe, which feeds into a society, you have so much control of the kind of change you want to impact in the world by virtue of how you show up in your family.
That's true.
For yourself, for your wife, for your children. I sometimes think I enjoy being pregnant more than I do being a mom.
Really?
I love being pregnant.
Oh no, you might just make many kids.
I love being pregnant.
What about it do you love?
But I just love being pregnant. I love being pregnant and I love giving birth. Dear God, if it's true that I am made in your likeness and image, would it be true that you manifest yourself twice? First as a superior being in men, and then as an inferior being in women.
Ooh.
And then God says, why do you ask? And I say, well, because it's what the word tells me. And God says, what do you think? And I said, I don't know. My experience of God, I don't box who God is in my life. And I experience God in different ways. And God uses me in different ways. This is ministry. Yeah. This being here is ministry. That book is ministry.
That's true.
King David Studio podcast.
She's a star, and I'm thrilled to have her. But I'm more excited about her life than her stardom. More about what she's gone through. She's had a child when she was relatively young, and she uses the word shame when she speaks of that time in her life. She's written a book. I have notes. I have so many pages. I scribble in books, by the way, because I think you've read it if you scribble through it. I have with me Ayanda MaNgubane Ampedi.
It's fine.
Yeah, every word that has letters like NG and it gets tricky.
MaNgubane, because bakhona Gubane or MaNgubane. Isibongo leso MaNgubane, but lona MaNgubane. Ngoba isibongo ungubane.
Oh, that's why. Yes. All right. Why does the Ma part play a role in the name?
You know, it didn't for a very long time. Until of course I went on this journey of self-actualization, I call it, unbecoming to become.
Yes.
And I think for me it's important that when I introduce myself, I honor my parents. I honor my mother, my father.
Yeah.
Umbovu Somahash, MaNgubane, who's no longer with us.
Yeah.
My father left me when I was 11. Because like I always say, I met my husband when I was 27. He married me when I was 32. I had a full mouth of teeth by then.
Yeah.
I was me.
And experiences.
And experiences.
Yeah.
And so, coming to the realization that was a whole person that I don't want to forget. And she is a part of that married woman. So that MaNgubane is important in that regard. And it's an honor. It's an honoring to my parents because they raised me.
Does it appear in your, and excuse the stupidity of my question, does it appear in your ID that way, or you don't? It's just how is your presentation of yourself?
It's my presentation of myself now.
Okay.
It doesn't appear in my ID like that. But there are things, for instance, that I've kept, like my old cards that still have Ngubane. I still use.
You still use them?
I still have my Ngubane ID. So yeah, there are parts of me that represent that. But like I said, this came, or I became intentional about it once that journey had started unfolding for me.
And why is it so important to still hold on to it? Because I say this, there's a narrative that says you're now a new person. You are married now with different life experiences. Why does that part still matter?
I don't know who says that. And I don't know why they say that.
Okay.
Because isintu doesn't say that. Ngesintu, when umuntu wesifazane goes and ayogana komunye umuzi, she remains ma
Ban.
ma
Yes.
mkhize, ma even la aganile khona. So I don't know who's come up with that modern narrative that says you lose yourself and you die and cease to be who you are and become a new person in this family. I don't subscribe to that. I subscribe to that we are all individuals and we're a total sum of every experience, every word, every path, every journey that we've ever traveled that's gotten us to this point, which is part of what I say in the book about two halves don't make a complete whole because you're a different half and he's a different half. Whole people make a healthy, beautiful relationship.
Got you.
Right?
Yeah.
And so for me, that's important, that we understand that we have come together as individuals to build on what we're going to now define as us, as the new us. But it doesn't mean that I cease to exist.
Of course.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that, and allow this conversation to take this journey quietly.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that, because some would say your grandma, for example, your dad's mom, became who she became, leaving behind her maternal side, and now joining now a new family that has married her, and now defining that this new direction, and now making sure that the new life that she's decided flourishes with this man and this man's surname. You speak a lot about it, by the way. And I brought it up on my radio show. I spoke about Adam and Eve not having surnames. so it's now she takes on a new role of becoming Nkosikazi with this surname that is revered by these people. And she's saying, I'll be a part of this and I will help you grow it. And it seems your grandma and many other women that you've met over your very young life subscribed to that logic. But it doesn't sound like you do.
No, it's not that I don't. I think it's different for all of us. And I think because we come from different circumstances and our journeys are different, and we're different individuals who are charting our own paths, things will be different. Maybe my grandmother didn't have a choice. Maybe my grandmother didn't have a different narrative, a different reference of what a woman can be or should be, or that she even had power to choose how to chart her own life. And by the way, she had a beautiful life. She had a really beautiful life. She had a husband she adored. She had a family she adored, and they adored her. So it's not to say that I don't subscribe to it. I just don't subscribe to the narrative that says that when I marry, I cease to exist. She existed. Maybe disempowered in who she was, because I don't think my grandmother understood her own power. But those were the times. And I think for me, as beautiful as she was, because in having given and sacrificed so much of herself to make this work for the family, she brought up a beautiful family.
It's true.
But what that also did, or the flip side of that, in her not recognizing her own power, is that she couldn't recognize power in me, because I represented a her that was disempowered, right? So there's a flip side to that.
Of course. I imagine that carries on, not only in your life, but in the life of many young people.
Yeah. It does. It does. I mean, I speak about that chapter as dethroned, talking about the dethroning of girls in the family system, because we're thrust into a world that doesn't give us an identity. Our entire identity is linked or associated with ubaba. And so we grow up really not understanding who we are. And so part of my ministry and part of my message is about bringing back the beauty of who we are as girls. Ekhaya, I mean, I'm the firstborn, born with a twin brother and a younger brother. But ngumafungasho. IsiZulu isintu sithi mangabe ngumafungasho ilokhu fungwa ngaye.
What does that mean?
It means we swear by her, literally translated.
Wow.
As the firstborn daughter, meaning the buck stops with her, sifunga ngaye, because umafungashwe angavusa umuzi osufile. right? But because we don't have context of those things as references, because whether they're consciously, deliberately kept away from us as young girls, I don't know. But we don't have context and reference to those things about the beauty of who we are. Some of us, Mkabayi, who Mkabayi was the region queen, older sister to Senza Ngakhona, Isilu Senza Ngakhona, Boaz, Isilu Shaka. And Mkabayi never married, yet she was kingmaker, right? She charted the journey of her own brother, having gone and chosen a suitable mate for her father, who would then bore them or birth them a king, Senza Ngakhona, which is why it's called Senza Ngakhona, because we're doing it the right way. And so there are some of us, who don't even understand as women that our journeys are so different, that some of us are mkabayis in our life journeys, in our life paths, that we're not meant to get married. Marriage will dilute your power, because you're a mkabayi who must stay behind and raise the family home or elevate the family home.
It's an important part of and I call it Zulu culture, because I don't want to assume it's applied the same in other cultures. It's an important one. And you're right in saying that it's not spoken of often. It's probably not spoken of at all. What do you think that is? What is your observation of that?
Well, I think it's about, I think it's broad. I don't think there's like just one answer to that. But I definitely think that it is about those who privilege, or who benefit, or who are privileged through culture. Right. So we will come up with the narratives that support us.
Of course. History will be told by the victors of the war.
Exactly. Yeah. It's the hunters that then tell the story that glorifies the hunters.
Yeah.
Right. And so, again, it was disturbing for me. I remember when I came out and started talking about polygamy, for instance, there was this show, Mnagwethu, and I was quite disturbed by how this culture of polygamy was being represented. And so I went and I asked elders, I researched, and I sat with wise men, to say, is this correct? Because something really seems off. I knew it was off, but I needed that wisdom, to cement it. And absolutely agreed with me. And when I came out and spoke against how this culture of polygamy was now being presented, where your wife is just ambushed with the mistress, and or it's a mistress 10 years, and now there's a new and I'm here to ask. And I was like, we got to address that, because this is a narrative that supports a toxic kind of masculinity, right? But if we were to talk about what polygamy really was, to begin with, it wasn't about lust. It wasn't about men. Actually, polygamy is for and is about women.
Okay.
And that is why I refer to it as an empowered decision to take another wife. Because as a husband, you don't take the power away from your wife to make that choice for herself. She decides for herself that for whatever reason, I want another wife to come in and assist in this household.
It's not about men. It's never been about men.
It's never been. In fact, it's always been about the family. And so as soon as you subtract Ubuntu, which is at the core of who we are as Abantu, as soon as you attract Ubuntu in that process, it's no longer polygamy in the way that our ancestors and our forefathers wanted it to be. Because at the end of the day, in our culture, anything that does not build, anything that doesn't elevate the family, whatever destroys society, is not for us.
It's not right. But why is it that over time, and TV shows, for example, make polygamy, and I'm sure I'm not wrong, look like this is a man's world. It's a man's game. It's meant to be the man who benefits. He has got all these women in his life. What has happened to the story that is told about it?
I think what's happened, quite honestly, is that we don't have enough voices to counter that narrative. And it's one of the things that were problematic or challenging for me when I then came out publicly to try and correct it. The death threats I received.
What? It got to that point?
Yeah. Like usihlukanisa nabafazi bethu. But also on the flip side, it was also the praise. Women walking up to me in shopping centers and saying, "Thank you. Thank you for saying this," because I could take this video to him and say to him, because I didn't know. I didn't know any better, because suddenly amadoda aseyitshela nje ukuthi hayi isithembu esanomubani. And by the way, isithembu is very sacred.
Okay.
Akusena umbani uthatha isithembu.
Who?
There are people who are chosen for it or anointed for it. Isithembu is very sacred. It's not just the thing you wake up one day and you say, I can have 5-6 wives. Because remember, even for you, David, mangifika nje ngizoba umkakho. Ngifika and I pour into your life, because by the virtue of my divinity as a woman, because I carry life and I am life, right? I pour into your life. I nurture into your life. Ngiyakha. So can you imagine? Uyindoda yodwa namakhosikazi are powerful out too. Isithembu you must be anointed for. It's not just for any Tom, Dick and Harry as we now think or believe.
But why is it that there should be only a select few? One can easily say it's like royalty becoming a problematic concept by those who are saying, but even I can lead. I can even lead better than this guy. Why is there the chosen few in society? And I say this because you are a proponent of equality. You speak of it so much. And that's why I ask why this particular concept has its own, well, we could look at this one slightly different.
As human beings, siyafana.
Yeah.
Kodwa some are more equal than others. Right? Even in the jungle, there is hierarchy. We can't argue that. Kodwa, so my issue around equality is around male and female. And that for you to rise as a man, I must be disempowered. Or for you to enjoy your certain privileges, I must be oppressed. That's my biggest issue.
Yeah.
But we're all anointed for different things. You're anointed for this. It's probably something I could never do. And that's just what it is. And like I say, there's even hierarchy in the jungle. And so in our divinity, we're anointed for different things. So much so that even within a family, someone may think that because you're the firstborn son, you carry certain divine privileges in that family. Meanwhile, you're not the chosen one. And I don't know if I can ever reason logically how that process unfolds, but I know that it exists. And because I don't know everything, I can't tell you how it unfolds.
Are they men, logically now, so very simplified, that are just, this is not their world, they shouldn't even try it? Is it right to always point to ability to look after a household that's bigger than your pocket? Or is that not the only thing that we should use to measure polygamy in that context? Because there's some people who say you cannot do it if you can't afford it. Does that apply in this context? Please. I hope it's not my question that made you drink water.
Gosh. I think as women, we want different things. And so I can't speak for all women. Umuntu wesifazane who says, I don't care if he can afford this or that. I just need him to love his children. I need him to give me attention. I need him to love me. I need him to, and that's enough. And so, having said that, I can't say that should be a defining factor. Kodwa umuyindoda nje. Umuyindoda nje. Fanele ukwazi ukunakela umntana wakho.
Of course.
And that responsibility is multifaceted at the core of it. And I think that's the bit that we sometimes take for granted, is being able to provide a conducive environment for your family to thrive, whatever that looks like. And whether it's money that enables you to do that, or whether it's your time and being present that allows you to do that, we want different things. And it's okay to want different things. Sintu City, ingane yomfana at a certain age would be given a cow to look after when he was now coming of age. And when he looked after the cow well, he would be given more cows to look after. And the more cows he looked after well, the more and more so. And as maidens, we look at you and say, lawyer.
Yeah.
But the essence of that lesson in our culture is that as a man, if you could not look after cows, you certainly could not look after a family. So, mangabe kuthiwa ubuhle bendoda izinkomo zakhe, asikhulumi ngobuhle bakhe in the sense of wealth.
Yeah.
Because even that's now been distorted. We're talking about ubuhle bakhe in the sense of the kind of responsibility he's able to carry as a man.
Yeah.
Right.
That has changed completely.
That has changed completely to now cows, because cows represent wealth. Nah, it was actually about responsibility. If your wife and your children are not thriving in the environment that you have brought them into, then you have failed as a man.
Wow. If I ever forget to say this, and I apologize. Your nose is like English people's nose.
My grandfather used to say that. Oh, because you read the book.
But if I ever forget to say that, I might just. Because I'm staring at it now and I see it. It's like, damn, he was
So right. You're like, okay, Umkhulwam was right. AP was right. Japan.
There is a sharpness about it.
Japan was right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you know, and also, I'm lucky, and I consider this luck on my side. I don't know how I'm able to do this, to attract people who come here and they do one thing well.
Yeah.
Almost all of them. They educate.
Yeah.
And I call them a profile. I call them history. We are making sure that we preserve history, but I walk away a better man and a better person and slightly more educated. And I don't share this belief alone. I realize with the comments that we see that he was saying, wow, I learned so much.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling this is going to be one of those master class. I have a feeling.
So you're anointed for that.
I guess.
You're anointed for that.
That's my world, I guess. Eh?
Yeah.
Why did you write a book?
I didn't grow up thinking I was going to ever write a book. I grew up thinking, I probably need to go study, make some money, make sure I elevate Uma in some way, because as a single parent, things were hard for her. And so I came to Joburg. I knew somewhere at the back of my mind that I wanted to act. I studied marketing and advertising.
We went to the same school, by the way.
Oh, AAA?
Yes.
Okay.
I was in and out, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
You were the one of those.
I did a small diploma because I worked for an ad agency. And they said, here's an opportunity.
Yeah.
I didn't realize what I was signing for. After I go there, they would say, but you have to work for us for another 3 years.
Yes.
So that's what I signed for. So we went to the same school.
Okay.
So yes, you're saying you came to Joburg.
Yeah, I came to Joburg, and I knew I had to find a part-time job because my mom couldn't afford to upkeep me. And so I did, studying part-time in advertising and also in retail during weekends. And I'd always wanted to act.
Yeah.
Right. And I knew that being in Johannesburg would land me that opportunity. And so that's how I got into acting. And so I'd always just, thought, I'll work, I'll act, or whatever it was. And then I fell pregnant when I was 21. Yeah. And then it became very clear to me that between working in corporate or being an actress, I had to go the corporate route because the acting thing wasn't going to sustain me unless I was on Generations for years and years and years and years. And the chances of getting that were like next to nothing, really.
At the time you were getting cameo roles.
Yes, at the time I was getting cameo roles.
Yeah.
And so I was in corporate for a while, and then decided, actually, one day sitting in my very beautiful office, got on the phone to call my daughter back home. She stayed with me then. She was about 4, I think. I called her and she said to me, Mama, ngizokubona nini, or something like that. And I thought it's a strange question because I leave work and I go home and then, we're in the same house. And then having put the phone down, realized that actually I hadn't seen her in 4 days.
What? You're consumed by work?
I'm so consumed by work. I'm in the same house as her, but I actually had not seen her because I would get back from work so late and leave early in the morning to beat the traffic.
Yeah.
And that realization for me was the thing that was, nah, I can't do this. I mean, I think at the back of my head, I'd been thinking about leaving corporate and pursuing entrepreneurship. What else can I do? Because I wanted to own my time. And the only way for me to go back into the acting, which was calling, was for me to own the time. And if I was still bound in the corporate space, there was no way for me to go to auditions. There was no way for me to. So I needed to free myself of that bondage.
Yeah.
And those were the two reasons why I left corporate.
Did you know something interesting? We get people calling or me when they meet me. They say, I want to do voices. And I say, yeah, you can do it. What language do you speak? I always hope they speak African language because it's continue the need in that space.
Yeah.
And they say, I don't know, I speak Setswana, Sepedi and whatever. And I say, great, come to the studio tomorrow around 11.
Yeah.
They can't because they have to be at work.
Yes.
So you see how you can't trade one for the other.
You can't.
It is what it is.
It's got to be one.
Yes,
You got to choose one.
So you were in that same exact position.
I was in that same position. I was in that same boat and I had to jump ship. I was like, I'm jumping ship. And I don't know if I'm going to sink or swim, but when I'm in the water, the only thing I can do is just trust in the faith I have in God and believe that this is going to be okay. That was in 2007. And I haven't seen corporate since. I haven't sat
in an office
in that way, but because I run a comms business, I'm an entrepreneur. Yes, I see corporate in that space.
It's still your time.
Yeah, I speak to them as clients, and I'm just like, I'm good. So I didn't. Your question was where I write the book, and
yes.
so I journey along. Went into the acting space, did really great, featured on some really great shows. My very first break was Nomzamo. It wasn't my first break. I mean, Generations had already happened before then, and then corporate happened. But my big thing after corporate was Nomzamo.
Yeah.
And so I land this big role, and I'm playing lead, and it's like, wow. But then, with the acting, the gigs are few and far in between.
Yeah.
So you land this thing. I left corporate in March, I think it was. And then in August, I landed Nomzana. But then I shot for 6 weeks and then it was quiet.
Whoa.
And then you wait for
the
next season or the next one. And the next season only came like a year after.
What?
So I had to busy myself with other things as an entrepreneur. So that sustained me. Fast forward, now in Isibaya, and 4 years into marriage. So it's interesting because I think it's part of why there were some clashes in my life around this time when I wrote the book, because a lot of people weren't expecting that from me, because people often define you by the chapter in which they walk into. So a lot of people in that space walked into the chapter of my life where it's February, we start shooting Aspire season 1. None of us really know each other that well. In March, I got married. 9 months later, I had my second child. And then another 18 months later, I had my third.
Wow.
And so, I mean, I was pregnant for
a better part
of season 1. So then, I was a young Makoti, young wife, and
busy on a busy show,
but
getting famous. Yeah, that complicates life at all.
Yeah, but you see, I wasn't riding on that wave because I had a young family, and so for me, the big thing for me, the priority for me was the children and the family, right? And so I was kind of like behind the scenes. People were going to Abo Metro FM Awards, they're doing this, they're invited left, right, and center, and I'm declining. I'm just declining because and also it just wasn't my thing. I suppose as a young mom, young wife, you think about it differently in the sense, lengubo efanele angikwazi ukuyiphinda, number one.
Oh,
and I'm thinking fees and you know what I mean. I can't. And you're invited to like 3 events a week.
Yeah.
And it's a different dress.
Sure.
And I'm like, I can't afford that.
There's a new word for them, or they describe them differently. But Tini, I got an invite somewhere. But casual is defined different. Easy something.
Yeah.
I remember
yeah.
I said, is this smart casual? Because when you get there, they're all dressed up.
Yeah.
And yet they said you must be smart casual. It's like, you see now.
Got you.
So you had the same pressure.
I had the same pressure. So I was like, I'm not going to subscribe to this.
Yeah.
And this is not me. And you know, okay, I'm a sponge for energy. So I sponge up people's emotions in a space.
Yeah.
And I become very sensitive to the energies around me. So I'm mangisinda. And so you'll find me in a space where maybe I really have to be there, but I'll quickly leave because it becomes too much for me.
Don't leave here.
No, there's not enough people here,
don't
and the energy is right. Let's just say the energy is right.
There's so many cars outside.
Yeah.
So
No, so I fast forward to a time then where I've given so much focus to the family that I'm actually feeling like, okay, I'm not okay.
How many years into the marriage?
It was about 4 years into the marriage.
Okay.
Like I'm not okay.
Ooh, it's the same time with the church. We'll get there.
Yeah, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
There was this deep sense of sadness in me, almost like a sorrow. And I realize now when I talk about it and I describe it that it was actually the same. It was actually the same emotion as grief.
Wow.
Because what had happened was I was mourning myself. I'd lost myself so much that I didn't recognize who I was. And I couldn't find me. Like, even as I tried to find myself, I couldn't find me because everything that now defined me as this new person, newly married, children, and was just this person in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
And that became problematic for me.
Wow.
Thank God I was introspective enough, and I think God being God was able to steer me in the right direction, in that I haven't become like a lot of women who at the age of 60, 70 never get to find themselves.
It's only then that they start asking those questions.
Yeah. I got to ask them when I was 35, 36. And I was like, no, something's not right.
What was the first question that crossed your mind? Because the book starts like a big blockbuster. It opens with a church scene, essentially.
With the dear God.
Exactly.
Conversation between God and I.
Aha.
Where I said,
let's look. No pressure.
Oh, no, I know
You know
this.
it.
Yeah. I'm going to paraphrase it, but I know
Okay,
it. And I said,
yes.
dear God, if it's true that I am made in your likeness and image, would it be true that you manifest yourself twice? First, as a superior being in men, and then as an inferior being in women.
Ooh.
And then God says, why do you ask? And I say, well, because it's what the word tells me. And God says, what do you think? And I said, I don't know. Long and short, God says to me, you go and find yourself. And there where you find me, where you find yourself, you will find me also. And that's when the journey began, which became the unbecoming to become journey. Unbecoming, the core essence of that is that perhaps the journey is not about becoming anything, but that perhaps the journey is about unbecoming everything that the world had ever told us we were, so that we can become all that the world, all that God had created us to be. So for me, that journey was about unlayering to rediscover myself again, because I felt buried. I felt buried.
When you feel buried, there must be someone burying you or something. What was it for you? Because you make reference to societal issues. You make reference to to what you grew up into, what you were born into. You make reference to how men have become, and and you also make reference to my favorite chapter, where it's actually where the lessons, where you talk about women play a role in how young women are raised, become.
Yeah.
So what for you was the weight on top of you?
It was every single chapter in that book.
Yeah.
The family. I mean, the first thing I had to confront was how my grandmother had filtered me or saw me, her perspective of who I was in the family structure.
That touched you really hard.
That touched me really hard. And I didn't understand it until I began the journey of that unlayering of the coats that were put on me that didn't belong to me. Because you see, and make no mistake, my grandmother loved me to no end, and she was a beautiful soul. But she knew what she knew then, and that was her gospel then.
Yeah. So you got to understand it eventually.
I got to understand it, and I got to forgive it, and I had to forgive it. Okay. I had to let go and forgive it, because I also understood or realized that I carried quite a lot of resentment because of it, because I felt like there was a responsibility that was imparted on me. So people benefited from what I could provide. Yet there were people who were treated better because of the privilege of who they are in the family structure, and that would then be my brothers, right? And it's not to say that my grandmother treated me badly. It's just that when, as a child, you know what you know. So when my brothers would walk into the room, you could see her eyes would light up differently to when I walked into the room. And as kids, we see those things, we know those things.
Of course, yeah.
And I adored her. I adored her for her strength. I adored her for her power, for her intellect and her wisdom, and all these things that she didn't see in herself. And she put so much emphasis on a legacy that would be, or a legacy that would be carried over by lineage based on gender, based on gender, and not based on, I don't know, divinity or who the person is, right? And I think the sad thing for me, and I always say this when I speak, is the sad thing for me was that when she passed on, the family home deteriorated. So we no longer meet there.
Yes.
Like, she left with the family home. And that was the sad part for me, is that she didn't understand that she was the power behind all of this.
It stands out, that part. And you make reference to it generically about how some households, one, don't realize where power rests, but very importantly, the attention is given to the wrong people. And it should never be about gender, because you say your education didn't see gender. None of the opportunities you had saw gender. But this one detail, it highlighted it and made it such a big problem. There's a part where you don't go home.
Yeah.
And I said, but were you that deeply hurt by this? And it probably means I also don't understand the gravity of your perspective of that. What may seem like a small detail, man, you're going to get married and move out anyway, which was the perspective, wasn't it? And the men will retain the surname, they'll grow it, they'll look after the household. And you're saying, well, then, but they didn't.
Yeah. I think kuya ngokuthi umuntu onjani and what you're called for. I think it affected me more because I understood much later in my life that actually ubaba, who was nkosana, and the one who anchored the family, right? Ubaba had actually left that responsibility to me.
Wow. Yeah.
And it was never said. There was an assumption that it was left to inkosana yakhe. It was left to umafungashe wakhe. So I think it affected me because it was a displacement. It wasn't just about an opinion. It wasn't just about an ideology of culture that's misrepresented, or it was more than that. I was displaced. And I was displaced not just physically, I was displaced spiritually in divinity. And so I think that's why it hurt more. And that's why I keep bringing it back to kuya ngokuthi ubani. For some girls, it means absolutely nothing. But you see,
you, it meant everything.
That's not the cross. It wasn't your cross, but it was mine.
Yeah.
And it was a big one for me even in terms of my identity as who I am. It was a big one for me. And I think also it felt like a betrayal of some sort, in that, like I say, we could benefit from the responsibility that she carries. Yeah. But the authority and the power, she doesn't have.
She can buy cruiser.
Yeah, and that's the world we're brought into.
She doesn't make decisions.
She doesn't get to make the decisions. She doesn't get to make the, and I'm a naturally, I'll say, a dominant personality. Yeah. So, I'll say what I say, but then you could just understand, ukuthi here, amazwi amafika bese egcina la.
There's a meeting you had where Granny called you and your brothers and clear instructions. And you actually said you were not quite invited to that meeting, but you happened to be in the room. So, you were part of the meeting. And the meeting was about the boys being asked, Nshatanin, so you can take care of the setup.
Yeah.
And they spoke, but they were not serious in their reaction to this important inquiry.
Yeah.
And you, after that meeting, was like, why am I not asked?
Because I'm here doing everything.
I'm in the room.
Not only am I in the room, I'm already taking care of stuff.
The family.
I'm already taking care of the family. I'm already wearing my father's shoes. Yeah. So why aren't we having this conversation with me?
But you're right. You're right in saying that some women will say, it's not my place.
Yeah.
I'm waiting to be married so I can go.
Yeah. But you see, my father had not instilled that in me.
Yeah.
I was the next best thing since sliced bread for my father.
Yeah.
And because the whole multiracial schooling system opened up at a time when my parents could afford to take one of us there. Between the parents, it was decided that I would be the first one to go because they couldn't afford for me and all my brothers to go. Yeah. So she would go because she's the cleverest, right? And so I feel like with my mom and dad, it was always, we were always gauged on merit, who deserved it, because they presented themselves as deserving.
Yeah.
And so when this happened with my grandmother and this conversation happened, it was quite a shocker. But again, David, I didn't understand how deeply it hurt me until many years.
No, I could tell. That's why
many years later.
That's why I judged you. I'll be very honest. I judged you.
Yeah.
Because there's a moment where you're meant to go home. You do go, but you don't get into the house.
Yeah.
You go and leave, essentially. Yeah. And I said, she can't be that upset.
So that moment wasn't just about what had happened between Gogo and I.
Okay.
But it was a deep sense of loss, because I was almost angry with her for not understanding how powerful she was. That she left and then left us in this mess. Sure. Because you just didn't get that this actually, you held this together. It wasn't the MaNgubane Senem that held this together. It was you. But because you didn't recognize it in yourself, you couldn't recognize it in me and hand it over to me to say, I'm passing the baton on to you so that I can take it and run with it. Because manje, it's like you're taking this baton and it doesn't even belong to you, because it's like, no, you weren't chosen to. And you see, we couldn't now have that conversation because she had left. She was gone. So I think my emotions about going back home had a lot more to do with a lot of other things. It wasn't just about that conversation.
Okay.
It was a lot that I had to process. And like I say, there was a lot of resentment.
Of course.
And I had to let go of that. So her and I had a conversation.
You're free now.
I'm free now. And I know that where she is, don't make me cry.
Is that you diverting the tears?
Yeah. I know now that where she is, she probably wishes she could have done better.
Yeah.
And I just have to be okay with that.
That she saw the
didn't know
world
any
the way
better.
she
She
saw
saw
it.
the world.
Yeah, and that's it. Because this happens often in our society.
Yeah.
Where we know better. We spend more time reading, studying, arguing, discussing. And there's a generation that came before us. They spend more time ensuring that what they believe remains.
Yeah.
Without question.
Yeah.
So you can't, I'm glad now with time, you don't judge it harshly.
No.
Yeah. Because when you read the book, if you were to stop there and not read further, you would say, oh, yeah, she's still angry.
No. I'm not angry anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not, I had to let that go.
So you wrote the book because you needed to reflect on a life that, for me, it's the lessons more than the stories.
Yeah.
I would do born. I see all these people that come in and go in your life.
Yeah.
But I look at it and I say, it's the lessons, man. Because I remember when we were reading, first time we read the book, I was with Shakes, we were in the car, and he grabbed it. I was driving. And he went way forward. And he was like, oh, she's the type that speaks about marriage. that's guiding people for marriage and all of that. And I said, maybe not. And I realized that there's a lot more. Let's go. Let's reflect your life story based on the way you wrote it. You start with the disagreement with church. But you stayed long going to that church in your marriage. An important part, and I even told this to a friend, I said, hey, the Sunday after marriage, which church are we going to? Is it your church or mine, or we are not going to church because we don't agree?
Yeah.
And this is where I judge you again. Why didn't the conversation happen long before? But let's hear why the church thing became so important for you that you started with it in reflecting your story. Because you start with it. And then you pause. And then you say, let me tell you from the beginning. Yes. The church.
So, and again, there's a difference between church and the four walls and what men have made it to be.
Absolutely.
And who God is and what God's plan is for us.
Yeah.
Right. And what God says about us.
And where is God? I grew up thinking that he knocks off at 12 on Sundays.
Mina, uNkulunkulu is my buddy, skim sami, umawami, ubabwami, friend. He is whatever I need God to be in that moment. So for me, it's the conversations in the shower. Last night, it was prayer on my in my patio. Other times I'm on my knees. Other times I'm washing dishes. Other times I don't have to say a thing, and I'm just listening to worship music. Yeah. And I might be in a really bad place, and all you see is just tears. But I'm listening to music minister to me, and I know that God can hear my heart. So for me, I to think that as human beings we can box with God is laughable.
We've pulled that off really well.
Yeah, we've pulled that off really well. Masebeti, we ask uNkulunkulu uthi, and you're just like, ha, yo, wow. Oh, we're not girl.
We make a reference we have a book where we make a reference to.
So my experience of God, I don't box who God is in my life. And I experience God in different ways. And God uses me in different ways. This is ministry. Yeah. This being here is ministry. That book is ministry.
That's true.
When I realized there was a time when I wanted to stop with all this public engagement because it became too much. And everything I said was controversial because Agiri, as women, were told that, especially when it comes to things of culture, that we don't have we shouldn't have an opinion, that things of culture, things that men speak about. So here's this culture that makes all these decisions about me. And Mina must not have a voice. Mina must not say anything. It must just be men. And so again, there was a vacuum for love, for a different perspective of culture, but a feminine voice. And so when I came out and challenged certain stereotypes and narratives, it became a bit too much. And at some point I was like, actually, I don't have to do this. Like, I really don't have to do this.
You can live it in your life.
Like, guys, honestly.
Not in the public.
You know what I mean? I don't have to do this.
Well, you took on the responsibility.
I took on the responsibility, and then I remember praying and in a really dark space, because I'm just tired. I'm tired. Because there are times, David, when I put out a video, and it's not me who said, who decided I'm just going to wake up and do this video. Yeah. I've been asked by those who guide me to put out content.
This message
is needed right here, right now. Which is why even when I wrote the book, I thought, you want me to write a book? Like, what am I going to write? I don't even... And then once I started writing, I realized that the words had always been in me, right? But because the book wasn't about me. The book wasn't for me. I was just a vessel to put out the words. And so remembering receiving an email, and I mean, we receive tons of feedback, tons. Like I say, I mean, the book has sold a lot. And I remember receiving this one letter that stayed with me. It's one of the ones that touched me a lot. And she said to Mrs. Ayanda, it was very short. I'd set the date. The plan was in motion. I'd bought the book. I hadn't read it. But something just said, read this book. And she says, I read the book. And I want you to know that your book saved me.
Whoa. And
so when I think about quitting the public engagement, I always go back to that one soul that this book saved. And I'm like, okay, this is why I'm sent to do this. Because it's bigger than me. It's not about me.
What do you think is at the heart of the purpose?
Identity.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of injustices that have been mitigated against women, but I think one of the biggest injustices is that as women, we didn't get to write our own story. We were just kind of thrown into a narrative that the world had already decided for us. So as ingane ntombazane, you come into this world that rejects you on the basis that you're a girl child. And then I grew up in this family where I see mom carrying all the responsibility and baba all the authority. But then I also question, okay, who is God? Because in divinity, the divine feminine is not represented. And so I don't know where I fit in. Was I even made by God? And then by the time I get to school, I'm already told, and you know, you got to dress properly because boys will. And you're thinking, okay, so even this body doesn't belong to me. But not only does it not belong to me because I get told what to do with this body, but also, should anything happen to this body, that's my fault, right? And then you go into a space of relationships where you're for many of us who grew up in fatherless homes, we don't even have a reference for what a healthy masculine, relationship is, because we're so used to unhealthy masculinity. And I have to correct this, because there are a lot of people who think that I'm not pro patriarchy. I love patriarchy. I love men. We need men in our society. I want men to be what God created them to be.
Which
is protective, which is provider, which is everything that is beautiful, that is you, guys. Everything that is beautiful, that is you. So it's not that I don't want men, which is why I always say I'm not a feminist by the world's standard of feminism, what feminism is. Because if I defined myself as a feminist, what happens when the feminist movement, or what happens when we conquer toxic patriarchy, and now we have
a new thing. Or society called I call it a Stockfell called feminism decides to us we are not fighting anymore. And then when you're left there.
We're left there because now what am I? I don't want to be defined by what I'm fighting against or the system that I'm fighting. I want to be defined by who I am. Yeah. And so I think so much of who we are as girls has been predefined for us because we're just thrust into situations and then we just have to put labels on ourselves. And then by a certain age, you must be married. And even that's not really our choice because, men choose who they want to marry and we just, we say yes to the one who asks. So we wait for the one who asks, right? Because
you start planning for it.
We start planning for it.
Your little kid.
Yeah.
How you behave and
all of that. And then by the time you wear that wedding dress, you leave all of you behind. You transition into what society expects of a wife to be. And yet we're all different individuals. I can't be the same wife as the next wife. Mm-hmm. They're not me and I'm not them. You know what I mean? So how can we all conform to this one narrative of what a makoti is? And by the way, makoti is not even a Zulu or Nguni or any of that.
Yes.
Any of anything that is us.
Yeah.
So I think the reason so many people resonate with this book is because it gives them an opportunity to not only rewrite their story, but to find a reference for an identity that was stolen from us.
Let's talk about societal expectations of a wife. In the church, I call it church disagreement, for lack of a better reference. You say, I was doing everything a good wife was meant to do. But I sense a tone in the way you say it that society's good wife is meant to be. You oblige. You do as authority says. What is the good wife in that context? And with the sarcasm that comes with the statement, what is a good wife?
I suppose it's blind submission. And blind submission is you will do what your husband says. You will you invest more in him and his dreams, his goal, his ambitions than you do in yours. It's the forgetting. It's the forgetting you and doing it for the family. Yet, and that's fine if we're both pulling our weight. But there seems to be an expectation that women are supposed to pull all the weight and other people just do what they want. So women get married and men just carry on with life. So if you are doing golf every Saturday, you continue to do golf every Saturday and nobody is telling you what the kids need A, B, and C, right? But Mina, if I was doing girls' nights every Saturday, that's got to stop because as a good wife, we don't do that. We don't do girls' night every Saturday. You're now a married woman. You carry yourself in this way. And actually, you don't wear short stuff. Wenzani. You can't. And I'm not talking bum shorts or even anything just above the knee is too much. You're a married woman now. Finally, uziphathe ngendlela ethize.
What is the word? I want to use the right word. Uzithobe. Is that word?
Uzithobe, yes. Othobekele uhlezi nje. Manje inkinga yami mina ngikwazi ukuhlezi nginje. But I spoke of blind submission.
Yes.
I think empowered submission is beautiful.
Explain that.
Because I do it because I want to. I do it as a choice. I do it because I want to. So I'm going to treat you like my king.
Because that's the decision I've made.
Because that's what you give me. That is what you give me. I just pour out the energy in whatever I receive from you. I pour it out. And so mangabe kufanele ngithi ngize ngiguqe ngamadolo ngingakulethela ukudla ngiguqe ngamadolo ngithi myeni wami but I want to and I can do it even with an audience publicly, but if I want to,
not because not because society
there's an expectation for you to do that.
Do you know earlier when you were describing this woman, I heard a female voice saying wenzani. Not a male voice necessarily. I didn't hear a man athetisa this lady with a short skirt. In my imagination, I heard a voice of an aunt. I heard a voice of Rakadi. You're not supposed to be doing that.
I get it. We've become the proxies for men. We've also become the voice for that perpetuates the
that's what
that
so is my imagination not far off?
No, it's not.
So women are the ones that are keeping this.
But again, to our defense, we don't have a healthy reference for what a powerful woman is in terms of who we are and who we are divinely created to be. We don't have that reference. We don't have that identity. And so, mangikhule ngazi ukuthi power rests with men.
You'll keep it going.
I'll keep it going because that's what I know. That is what I know.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's the tragic part of it.
So that's why you would hear the female in your family saying, it's not your place.
No. Yeah, exactly.
That meeting is for men.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's interesting because when I was on Isibaya, there was a time when my character, who'd been this beautiful, submissive wife.
Talk about the irony of life.
I look
God playing a joke on you.
There was a time, I think 2 years before the show ended. We sat down with my executive producer, Desiree Machraf, and we spoke about how we are going to re-narrate the landscape of disempowered women, because the landscape was changing in television. We're seeing more and more powerful women taking leading roles and female power being celebrated, even though I think sometimes misrepresented, because there's so much representation of female power with guns, as if that's who we are,
drug lords.
and drug lords, and that's not who we are. So we spoke about, okay, so we want Phumelele, your character, to take on this journey of, and I'd already started captioning my captions unbecoming to become. So the hashtag unbecoming to become had become quite popular. And it just so happened that the story coincided with the time when I was writing the book and having this conversation or engaging about the unbecoming conversation publicly. And so having chosen Phumelele, what do you want to do with Phumelele? And we threw around some ideas. And I said to her, look, I think first of all, she should go back to school, because we and I love rural women. I love the village. It's where I center myself. When I'm stressed, that's where I go. I disappear for 2 weeks. I'm there and I'm just home. And so we said, how do we give voice to rural women? Let her go back to school. Let her go back to school. Get her drivers, like the basic things.
So the
that are
decision
doable.
was made that she's going to be empowered.
She's going to be empowered, right? But both of us were absolutely against her leaving the Zungu household.
Okay. Yeah.
We both said, we cannot drive the narrative that women only find their power outside marriage. That power within marriage is beautiful, and that it can coexist, and that it pours into an even more powerful family. And we need men to realize and understand that when my wife is educated, empowered, it shouldn't threaten me. But this is what it can do for our family. And so we both said she doesn't leave the Zungu homestead, whatever happens. And so we bring in this character that's going to be the catalyst for her remembering who she was, because, now the kids are grown and she's home and there's nothing to do. So we bring in this other Fenyang character who comes in as the old, not even boyfriend, as an old friend who would basically remind her of who she used to be. Remember all those dreams you had? Remember, like, you wanted to be a nurse? Like, what happened? What happened to you? You just got married to this guy who had another wife, and like, what happened? And now you're and she's thinking, oh man, like, actually, I remember all of that, and now I can't do it. My kids are in school and I can't do it. Let me tell you, the war that storyline started in this country.
Wow. Then what is she doing?
She was just speaking to Fenyang, smiling to Fenyang. Already, Phumelele is... I know, guys.
We are fair.
No, I wanted to say that, but I was like, I'm not going to say that.
I'm petty, so the word fair is not that strong in my vocabulary.
Okay.
That's why I can say it.
That's why you can say it. So the men were outraged.
Oh, no.
The men were outraged.
We're far away from this ideal world that is you speak of.
Yeah.
To be honest.
And I'm thinking, what? She just spoke to this guy and she's remembering who she used to be. And you have a problem with that.
Jeez.
You have a problem with her dreaming again and wanting better for herself. It makes no sense.
What was the problem from what you observed?
I think maybe it was the rooted toxicity in us.
Yeah.
That once you're a wife, Mina as a man, I become complacent. You do what I want you to do. And anything that might feel like you're stepping outside of these four walls that I have built for you to be imprisoned in, and I say not live in, be imprisoned in. Yeah. Anything that feels like you're about to step out and better yourself means that, because see, toxic masculinity wants to keep us subdued, never realizing who we really are. Because once you realize that and you realize, there's no limit to who I am. I can be and do whatever I want to. I can be whoever I want to.
I can fly.
I can dream. I can fly.
Yes.
Then you're going to fly and leave me behind. That's not healthy.
Is that, from what you observed, the natural fear that men have? That if you fly, you're going to fly away. If you recognize that you're able to fly, you're likely to fly away.
I think so. I can't say it's one thing. I think the indoctrination, the conditioning, the socialization is so deeply embedded in us that's why the book has so many chapters. It's so many things. And I mean, I could have still written another 20 chapters even, because it's so many different things, but they all contribute to the subtext, that then is who we show up as in the world. And so, I mean, that storyline alone created such a war. Outside in the public domain, and even inside.
What?
And even inside.
When you say inside, are you saying the show or your life?
No, like the show. Yeah. In the show.
Yeah.
With my co-stars.
There was
serious tension. And so what I can say is Phumelele was never meant to leave the Zungus. My executive producers forced Phumelele to leave, and we decided that she had to leave because the environment became unbearable for me to work in. Yeah. Because that storyline had become, so I had to be separated.
What?
And a new world with me and this other character created.
So you're
away
not
from
part of this
because
whoa, and now you're talking production.
I'm talking production.
You don't shoot on the same day and time with other people. What in the world is that?
It was crazy. It was crazy. And I thought, what a shame. I mean, I was ready to leave the show before the story ended. So before the show ended, even before her storyline ended, I was ready to leave the show because it became so toxic. And I remember saying to my EP, Des, I said, write me out. Just write me out.
Yeah.
Killer. Like, I can't do this.
The money didn't bother you? The loss of income?
No, I don't. I wear many hats.
Yes.
I'm never
I'm just
bothered.
saying to you that.
No.
Yeah.
No, I was, and that's the other thing. I'm very empowered I'm very intentional about how I live my life.
Yeah,
so my decisions about what I want to do are empowered decisions. And that was an intentional thing for me because I never want to be on a film set because I have to work. I want to be on a film set because I love what I'm doing. I don't want to be slave to the art. I don't want to be slave to the craft.
You know it can do that.
It can do that.
Yeah.
It can do that. So I do many things.
And she didn't agree to your suggestion.
Oh, she said, hell to the no. And I mean, I was in her office bawling my eyes out. So frustrated by the toxicity and the animosity that had just erupted around me.
But what was it? It surely can't just be the storyline.
It can't. So Phumelele's journey came at the same time as the book.
Okay.
And that erupted.
Yes.
I think there was a misconception or misunderstanding that Phumelele storyline was about promoting my book.
Oh, okay.
And that just created a very nasty environment.
That this show is written for you.
Like, yeah, like, you know what I mean? And
Imagine
that thing I was
that.
saying, like, and imagine that, because remember, when we met this person, and that's why I say people make the classical mistake of judging you by the chapter in which they walked in on.
Yeah.
And people had walked into my life at a time when I really just, for me, Isibaya was just work and nothing else. It had nothing to do with the stardom, and that's why I wasn't going anywhere. I was just focusing on my family.
Yeah.
But then came a time when my true purpose was being birthed. And suddenly there's a rise in the star. But it must rise because purpose gives rise.
That's it.
Purpose elevates.
Yeah.
And I think there was a lot of toxicity relating to that. The book, this storyline. You know, there were people going into production and saying, we're not going to perform with her.
Because
Because it's actor story sakhe. David, you read the damn book.
I did.
The marriage thing is about what, 2-3 chapters?
Yes. It's a key part.
Out of 9, it's a key part.
It's a key part.
But out of like 19 chapters, you think
well,
Phumelele's story is about unbecoming to become?
No. And I say this also because, but it's a crescendo. The marriage is it stands out. You can't ignore it. It stands out quite sharply in the book. Just as much as in the character you're playing.
Yeah.
So promotion like so sizosebenza la Aspire.
Look at him!
PR. I have to color it like a journalist. It sounds nicer.
Oh my God. Yeah, so I think that was the general perception about what was going on.
And
it
you
was
were thinking they're crazy, these people.
I'm thinking, what the hell? like guys. And it was crazy. It was really bad.
Yeah.
You'll see there I mean, I've never shared this publicly also. I mean, you're having the benefit of hearing this publicly for the first time. But there's a scene where I'm supposed to go to a wedding. No, to Memulo, my daughter Uyamula. But by this time, I'm staying with this other guy in Joburg. Yeah. And production calls me, my EP calls me, says, what are we going to do? You can't go there. If you go there, we all go there. So I'm like, but guys,
what's going to happen?
What's going on?
But what was the big concern?
Just the toxicity.
Yeah.
And this is the thing about emotional bullying. It has many faces. So it was the ostracization.
That's not one of us anymore.
Yeah. And that was hard because when we started, we really were a family. Like we were finishing off each other's lines. It was like, it was magical. When Spire started, it was magical. It was so beautiful. And I'll never discard those years for anything because they were beautiful years. They were absolutely beautiful years.
And they slowly...
What changed that?
Yeah.
I think everybody was a star in their own right.
Hey, you're talking about a big show here.
Yeah. And at some point, who's the bigger star?
Hey.
And then the egos start to kick in. And then it's like you can be famous.
Were you part of the competition? The big star competition?
I don't know.
I asked this innocently because maybe you reflected and you found a star inside of you and said, hell, I'm also a star, which there's nothing wrong in recognizing your stardom.
I've never thought myself of anything less than a star. It's what my father taught me. It's what my mother taught me. But that's not all that defines me. And I think for a lot of people, it is what sustains them and carries them. Yeah. And I come into environments where, for me, it's not really about the ego. It's not about, if we're going to sit here and feed the ego, we're all going to go down a very dangerous, slopey path. Yeah. And I just think, because I'm naturally naive like that, I always think the best of people. It's something that I'm learning now to be a lot more discerning. To the Tutu syndrome.
Yes.
It's to be a little bit more discerning of people.
Yeah.
And that's why I think, I keep a lot more to self. It's harder to trust people. I was burned badly.
For trusting.
For believing that we all wanted all of us to win in life.
Yeah.
Who was it that said that people want you to to do well, just not better than them.
Mm, mm.
You must do well, but you must stay here where I can still say. So, and I think with the eruption of the book narrative, there was a lot of noise around me. And I think a lot of people didn't understand that. But you see, it didn't scare me because there had been noise before Isibaya about me, because that's who I am. But because certain people walked into my life at that chapter of my life where things had toned down because I was in a different space in my life.
Yeah.
And I had to wear a different hat in my life. People thought that's all I was. And there's nothing more to me than that.
So when you became who you really are.
So when I'm like, actually, it shocked them because actually I was the one who was like, I'm frustrated because this is actually not who I am. And I just want to come out of this thing that's now become a shell because it's not who I am. And when I found that voice and power again, it became a shocker, I think, to a lot of people. So that's what I think that thing was about. I have no squams with anybody. Like I'm okay.
They don't keep you up at night.
No, it is that world. It was very hurtful when it happened because, like I say, just naturally being naive, I trusted.
Yeah.
But it's taught me some really good lessons, and I'm grateful for those lessons.
I want to go back home to your upbringing, to Arun Bafana.
Japan. Somebody asked me the other day, why do we call him Japan? Because, well, my family came over, my cousins, my big sisters, Sweek, Tobile, and their kids for the Easter break, and we're all wearing ikipes. It's Abe Japan,
wow.
Zungu, Sengwayo, Kwabini, Itakazelo Zagazungu.
Yeah.
It's a little something that we're designed, so that's kind of like become the family logo. And somebody was asking me, why would we call ourselves Abe Japani when we have such a rich history? And I said, well, I didn't respond. I'm still going to respond. I forgot to respond, actually. But it's because Mkulu was, AB was an entrepreneur in his time. I think he was, I think about him now and I think he was so ahead of his time because Mkulu used to walk. He was so healthy. Like he was such a health conscious being. Like he would walk for days. He would stretch in the morning, get up and do exercises and stretch.
I think I saw that in the book.
And you're like, dude, this is in the village. Can you imagine you're waking up and you're doing your stretches? You're like, what?
Wow.
But he was way ahead of his time. He read a lot of books.
He was a sugarcane farmer.
He was a sugarcane farmer. Yeah. He had people that he had employees. Yeah. So it's the entrepreneurship that earned him that name, Japan. Lasempapala.
Wow.
Yes.
You speak of him even in the book with such happiness and excitement. He's a clear reference. At what point in your life did he pass away that you have so many rich memories of him?
I think I was 22.
Wow, he lived long enough.
I was 21.
Yes.
It was just before Piwa. It was before I had Piwa, my daughter. I was 21. Man, I think my grandfather was the epitome of what, as a child, looking at him. And I don't think he was perfect. I know that now. I'm old enough to know that nobody is, right? But he was such a strong patriarch, such a leader with so much wisdom, a caringness. And he was, after I think my parents, was the one person that saw me. My grandfather saw me.
Wow.
And to be seen is a big thing as a child. He saw me in light. He saw me in love. He saw me in glory. He saw me in destiny. There was a time I remember where he would pay piano lessons for me, pay for piano lessons because mom couldn't afford them. And he would say, Mkhulu wami actually now I think about it, I'm like, this dude was white. He wanted me to play the piano for him.
Yes.
And one day he'll buy a piano and he'd want me because he loved classical music and he wanted me to play the piano for him. Umkhulu Mpapala Showe. Do you understand how rural Mpapala Showe is?
And he stretched like, two, he wanted to play the piano.
And he listened to classical music. Never mind that he traveled abroad.
Yes, wow.
That he traveled abroad on church missions. Yeah. But my grandfather just saw me.
He had a dynamic career as well. Did it change later on in his life?
Yeah, so he was a school principal.
Yeah.
He was an entrepreneur, a teacher, then school principal, bought lots of land. Like I say, then obviously that translated into his entrepreneurship journey. But then he had an epiphany of some sort and became a pastor.
Became a man of the cloth.
Man of the cloth, yeah.
Interesting how he becomes so prominent in a particular sector and then moves to another one and become prominent again.
Yeah. So he was the founder or one of the founding members of New Jerusalem Church, Mpapala, and I mean he spearheaded that whole mission of establishing churches or church branches in South Africa.
And this is your mom or your dad's father?
My mom's father.
Your mom's father.
Yes, I don't know my dad's father very well. He was murdered in 1986. I was 4. I was 5.
Yes.
He was murdered in 1986. So I don't know him well at all. And then lost my dad when I was 11. Mm-hmm. So the patriarchal side of the MaNgubane family, I don't know too well. Yeah.
Your dad's passing away is such a dramatic story.
Yeah.
In the book, it's like it keeps you glued. Like you don't want the advert.
Yeah.
Adverting adali.
Yeah.
That's what happens to that. There's 2 stories that grabbed me like that. Even the cheating. The cheating was classic. Cheating reads like a comedy, if you ask me. It reads like you're reading it's a sitcom.
Yeah. And I was pregnant at that.
You know what I mean? Interesting. You keep that detail right at the end of the story. Did you realize that?
No.
The way you wrote it.
Yeah.
You describe the cheating, the incident.
Yeah.
And then you say, and I was pregnant.
Bang.
So as you're reading it,
I was 7 months pregnant.
It's almost like if you were watching it as a TV show, all the shots were close-ups. We didn't see your full structure. We were seeing close-ups. And then when you're busy acting and climbing up balconies and all of that, we don't see the full structure. That means
climbing up balconies. I remember that.
You see what I mean? We are not aware you're pregnant as you're telling the story. Until you say, and I was pregnant in all of this. Wow.
I was 7 months pregnant.
We'll get there, Bafan. And I'll tell you why. I like him because he is worldly. And he is, as you said, he sees you. And I think he influences what you become. Tell me if that's correct.
It is correct. It is very correct. Like I say, Umkhulu was my real reference for healthy patriarchy. Mm-hmm. I don't know enough about my father. I know that my father loved me dearly. Yeah. I know that my father, it didn't create a gender divide between me and my brothers. Mm. He saw me for who I was. But I was very young when he passed on. Yeah. With Umkhulu, it was different. There's a beautiful cultural or Isintu truth that I learned some years back from my dear friend Musokoza. He says, the word uyihlo,
yes,
which is the word we use in reference to ubaba, comes from was borrowed from the word ihlo.
Okay.
Because uyihlo, in his divine responsibility towards you, was the one who must see you first. Who must see you. So, uyihlo, not because, in fact, he is the head of the home, not because baba, but he is the head of the home because he carries the eyes, which must carry the vision. He carries with him the vision, not just about the family, but for each individual.
Yeah. Wow.
And so, endulo, when a child was born, it was the father who named that child. Mm. And the father would name the child in accordance to the vision that he had with that child. Mangimthatha ngimphatha ngimqamba ngithi uAyanda. uAyanda wasemabomvini oyokwandisa isizwe samabovu njengegama lakhe, andisa ukukhanya nothando, andisa induduzo, andisa konke okuhle. Yabo, so Ubaba would speak life into the destiny in accordance to the name because he carried the vision for the child. That's why the name is so important for us. It's so important for children. What we name our children is so important because every time I call that name, I'm speaking prophetically into your life.
That's true.
And every time I say yes, I receive whatever it is that you're speaking. So mangabe unhlupheko, what am I receiving? That's why the name was so important.
You know, in the Sotho culture, and I use Sotho as in a generic reference to Tswana in the Pedis and the North and the Southern Sotho. There's a phrase, Lina lebe seromo. It's used a lot by the Tswana people. I'm not sure about the Sotho. It says you give a child a bad name. That name sends him to do bad things. Yeah. So be careful of the name that you give your child. It's exactly the same concept.
Yeah, wow. Exactly the same concept. And I think that's part of why I'm so big on indigenous languages and our children understanding and learning and
because
articulating them.
There's a lot to learn from the language itself.
Yeah. Well, so much of who we are is embedded in the words, in the words that we use. Which is why you can take igama njengoyihlo and not see it as ubaba, meaning gender, male gender, but it divinely at the core, at the essence of what it means. What does it mean, right? And so if ingane zethu zingakwazi ukukhuluma isintu sakithi, isiZulu sakithi, isipedi sakithi,
there's a loss.
There's a loss because language transcends history.
Yeah.
And there's a lot we can learn just from language in terms of understanding who we are as a people.
Where's Granny in this picture when Ubaba is stretching outside?
My grandmother, Umantuli.
Yeah. She doesn't stretch along with them.
No, I don't think she stretched with them. I didn't hear that.
Just checking.
She kept the home very warm. Again, I don't know a lot about my grandmother because she passed away when I was just one or two.
Yes.
We stayed with her for a couple of months when mom couldn't take care of us. She was working, and so she sent us to a show to be with her mother. And so that's as much as I know. And that period I don't remember. But she is somebody who's remembered as very quiet, still waters that ran very deep with a lot of wisdom, that she wouldn't speak much, but when she did speak, whatever she spoke had substance. And Benomkhulu, they lived a very, I don't know what to call that life, because I remember seeing even, lamakhadi lawa, Valentine, it was not Valentine's then, but it was amakhadi babebhalelana amakhadi man. And you're like, this was 19 what?
And they were how old?
You know what I mean? It was a beautiful love story.
Yeah.
I just never got to experience all of it. What I do know is that when Ugogo passed on, Umkhulu just, even mom and her sisters, when they relate the stories, they didn't think he would live long because the two were inseparable.
Yeah.
And he actually asked the family to, I don't know what you call lomjovo, ahambe.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
was it at that point?
It was at that point. He lived long. My grandfather lived until he was 97.
Wow.
He lived, I think, over 20 years post Gogo passing away. So it was a lot for him.
Yeah.
It was a lot
so
for him.
So he lived with pain for a long time.
And all he would ever, like the thing he spoke about the most was just meeting Dinah.
The wife,
his wife. Sengizobona uDina ezulwini. That's
so you've heard that.
Yes, I heard that. And my reference of who Gogo is through him. And obviously now my mom and her sisters and the siblings.
Yeah.
But Mkhulu spoke so lovingly of her, even the way that he pronounced her name. Dinah.
Wow. Do you know there's something to be said about falling in love with other people through other people's eyes?
Yeah.
Because that's really what happened to you guys. Yes.
Yeah.
You saw her,
even
though she wasn't there.
Yeah.
That's an incredible. Your mom prayed for twins and she got them.
Yes, she did.
And I like how you celebrate this small victory of being the older one. It's such a small victory.
Couple of minutes.
Such a tiny victory, but for you it means so much.
Yeah.
Did you ever rub it to your brother with tea? I'm older than you.
I'm sure I did. But you know, life is interesting as we evolve. Funny enough, my brothers recognize who I am in their lives and in the family structure without me having said anything.
Wow. Yeah.
My twin brother, Usandile, younger brother, Tabani, who's a year younger. So we're almost all the same age, really. Have a deep sense of understanding, and I think it's a very spiritual understanding of who I am in their lives and in the family. And they respect that.
How do you describe that who you are in that context?
Ubaba.
They see that.
Yeah.
Do you know there's somewhere in the book where you talk about your aunt saw Ubaba in you?
Yeah.
You saw your dad in you.
Yes.
What was happening?
Oh, there was I'm not sure if this is what you're referring to, but there was a family dynamic around responsibility for my grandmother.
Yeah.
And
that's the
story.
Yes.
So there was some dynamics, and I stepped up. I stepped up like my father would have.
Yeah.
And so I think I've just always been that. And you know, my brothers don't fight me for it. My older brother does, and not older, my twin brother doesn't fight me for that position in the sense of Nkosana like hi.
You're a girl.
No.
Step aside.
No. He acknowledges it in his own way, and he respects it, and he gives it the authority that it deserves. And he will ask. He will ask. And it's interesting because we just had an unveiling for my grandmother recently. And I remember I said, because all the grandchildren from 3 different households came together to say, okay, we're going to do this for our grandmother. And of course, then they obviously saying, Ngesintu, we speak to Putsandile, my brother.
Yes.
So Putsandile, Putsandile takes the phone. Ayanda! But you understand? And it's okay. Wow. It's okay that, you know, these dynamics seem to play out in that public domain in a space like that. But rest assured, my brothers will come to me for guidance. Wow. They will come to me for what should we do next. They will come to me. And I think somewhere in them, they also know if they rob me of that because and that's why I say I think they understand it spiritually, divinely. And it wasn't forced on them. They just, by anyone, they just know. It's almost like, you know, somebody will come to me and say, yeah, because he has, ayo, yabona, if lento yenziwa wena, izohamba right.
That's what they say. Wow.
And it's funny because I'm actually only articulating that and recognizing or acknowledging it for the first time here now.
And interesting, as you're saying that, I say it's not in the book.
Yeah.
What you're saying.
Yeah.
That whether it's hierarchy or not, when it shouldn't be, it's clear who does what.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's clear who drives us, Yazban.
Yeah.
There's no question.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one.
And I don't fight. You know, we get there and the family wants him to observe certain things. He goes and he observes them. I don't go there and be like, and I also won't say, yeah, but I'm paying for all of this, or it's dingakalani. Okay, Sandy, Taban, this is what you guys will say, and this is what we will do. What do you think? Yeah, we agree. Yes, okay, go and do this. Done. They wouldn't even know where the funds come from or where, but I've played along with the narrative.
Yeah,
and that's fine.
The male,
yes. It's fine.
It's interesting how you just let it be. Maybe for me, and I say this, and it's something that I've said many times. I was raised by a woman only. My dad passed on when I was 3, so I have no reference of a male figure in my life at all. Interestingly, the only male figure I have reference to is my friend's dad, who's 4 houses down, and that's the male reference I have. But I didn't live with him, so I experienced him through my friend.
Yes.
My friend's disappointment, open a window into that space. That, they do this too.
Yes.
They disappoint.
Yes.
And sometimes they're great. They're loving. They take you to school, these people. So I have that reference. So my reference of a man, of a woman, is always that of a leader. I see it no other way. It's the weirdest thing, because my mom has always been the one to tell me what to do. She's always been the one that says, you're not going to do that. Till today, I still call her. I still call her to say, whether it's advice, whether it's a thought, whether it's just to settle the mind because something troubling me, and she wouldn't know why I'm calling, but I'm calling for that reason. So a reference of what you describe largely in the book, I have no reference.
Yeah.
Of that world.
Yeah.
Where the line is clear who's boss.
Yeah.
I don't know that. If I know a line who's clear who's boss, it's my mom.
Yeah.
She's boss.
And that's interesting because, again, we're different individuals who are charting different paths, and our backgrounds and circumstances will feed into the kind of individuals or people that we become and show up as in the world. Because if I looked at my dad and my mom's relationship, there were no issues there. It was very clear that mom was boss.
Okay, listen to that. Yes.
But I think because I had such an inquisitive mind, I understood that mom was boss somewhat, but I could see that authority rests with my father.
Yeah. The final say.
Yeah. But the responsibility rests with my mother. And I think that's partly why, like I said, it became very confusing for me when that was the kind of narrative my grandmother had so largely embedded in her. And I have to qualify this. When my father passed away, I was 11. Mom didn't necessarily distance herself from the family that she was married into, but I think by virtue of the person who brought us together is no more. The visits were less and less frequent.
Okay.
And so she was obviously more comfortable with her sisters, her siblings, and so we had a stronger relationship with the Zungu family than we did with the Ngubane family.
Okay, so your mother's side more than your dad's side.
Yeah, more than my dad's side. And so by the time I had graduated from high school, I was in tertiary, then started working. It was then when there was this desire, sense of belonging that I was yearning for. Like, no, but I'm not that close to the Ngubane side. And so I went back to I carried the name. And it's like, and so I went back to redefine that for myself and of course then for our family. And so it's kind of like there's a period in my life where I didn't know my grandmother for a long time and then was reintroduced to her again. And that's why I say I have strong opinions about who women are, right? Prior to this relationship.
Yes.
And remember, mom comes from a family where mom and dad were...
It was an equal scenario. Equal.
I hope so.
With respect.
Yes. I hope so. But I think even on the Ngubane side, my grandmother and Umkhulu, we called him Udedi because his children grew up calling him Daddy. So even as the grandchildren, we called him Umdedi. Umkhulu they had a beautiful relationship from what I'm told. I just think that school of thought was more dominant on this side.
The one that says what?
As a woman, not that you're not seen, but your glory is in the man.
Okay. Yeah, got you.
Yeah, your glory is there.
Your definition, you're defined
there
by this guy.
Side.
Yeah.
And mom came from a political family. Not necessarily my grandfather was opposed to the whole political thing, but my uncles were in exile, MK, and so I have family in the US.
That stands out
the doctor, Malumbo. So they like Mkhulu was well traveled, and he made sure that his children were. If there was anything he worked towards. It was making sure that his children were educated. And so we have uncles who were in London, started ANC offices in London, were in the US. And so her sisters had a very different perspective of what a woman is. You know, they were already engaging with issues around women's rights and liberation, and that I can be divorced. You know, I don't have to stay in a marriage that's unhappy. And you know, so some are widowed, some are divorced, some never married.
And it was fine.
Yeah. And again, I was raised by very strong women. So I come into contact, I'm reintroduced to MaNgubane. And I fall in love
with a different world.
With a different world.
Yeah.
And I fall in love with my grandmother, who's a representation of just, I don't know, like she was the epitome of beauty, of, you know, she was just gorgeous. She was just gorgeous. And she comes from a different school of thought.
Yes. That says, which is opposite to what the other side is saying. Oh, boy.
Yeah.
And you have to reconcile these two worlds.
And that's where the conflict came in. And remember, my true identity felt like belonged MaNgubane. Because MaNgubane. And so in going back and redefining and rekindling that relationship, it really was about belonging.
Yeah.
And where I belonged, I actually didn't belong.
Do you know the interesting thing about your story is you speak of you people you have to meet or places you have to be, and as much as they may not be good for you, but they're there for something.
Yes.
Whether like Ubaba, where your firstborn is as a reference, where you say, but I needed to go through that.
Yes.
to learn something.
Yes.
And walk away from it so I can maybe teach.
Yes.
Maybe you can educate.
Yes.
Or empower yourself.
Yes. We are a total sum of everything that we've gone through.
That is so true.
And everything carries something with it.
Yeah.
Good or bad. It's just about how you choose to see it.
What is your fondest memory of your dad? I liked your dad, and I
liked my dad too.
Yeah, I like your dad, and I was so sad that he didn't live long. In the movie, it's like, no, that guy shouldn't leave. You know, I really liked your dad. What is your fondest memory of him?
2 fondest memories.
Yeah.
The one was going to register at a multiracial school. And like my dad was just so proud of me. So it's not even about the memory, but more the sentiment that the memory carries.
Okay.
That pride. Yeah. Because Ubaba will gladly tell his friends publicly, "Uthi ingane yami hlanphile, phum number 1. Phum number 1. Hey, lengane ishaya belungu."
I like that. Shabelungu.
Ha! And
wow.
somebody once said, I don't remember where I saw this, but they were saying how as parents, it's so important to say the things that we wish to say to our children, but say them about them to other people so that they hear them. And I think my father did a lot of that, where I heard him speak about me to his friends in a very proud manner.
Do you know the second person to say that in this room?
Oh, really?
Oh, Professor Mamokgethi.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
It's exactly in those words.
Yes.
It's the words my dad said about me to his friends.
Yeah.
That has played a huge role in a lot of the things that she has achieved.
Yeah.
Those words remained in her brain forever.
That's why I say to you, Baba was like the next best thing since sliced bread.
Yeah.
It was like, where did she come from? This child who is so gifted and so clever and so, you know, we walked to a Chelsea Drive in Durban North, the multiracial school that I went to was multiracial, the Model C school.
Yeah.
I'd come from a private black school, but white teachers. And then before that, it was Bantu education. So I think I did first year, second year, elokishini, and then graduated
slightly
to
higher.
standard 1, and then standard 1 I was at this private school, St. Francis in town, and then from standard 2 I was in Model C schools. And you're supposed to write an entrance test.
Okay.
Right. So I'm going with Ubaba, and he's accompanying me to write this entrance test. And I go there. I don't remember his name, but he was an HOD, came in. So it's like English stuff and then the maths, right? So he's giving me these multiplication sums, these long division, long multiplication, nine.
Let's see if she can pull it off.
Did I not trap that thing?
Wow.
So my dad is sitting in the room. This white guy is, every time I come back and this thing is correct, he's so confused. So he gives me a harder one, thinking, and I'm just like, I'm just trapping this thing, right? My dad was so proud, like telling his friends, ha, lela pun belga call.
Wow.
And you hear him say this to his friends, relating the story when we get back. So it's those type of memories. But then there's this other one where Ubaba used to, by the way, when he passed on, he had left a pot of tripe cooking.
Yeah.
But tripe was his thing. But wayethanda olosiwe.
Okay.
So wayelithosa.
So it's fried.
Wayelithosa wayengajwayele ukulibilisa. So wayefika nethumbu what is it? Uthumbu What is tripe ngesizulu, guys? Inyama yangaphakathi.
Tripe
inyama yangaphakathi.
Borotho in my language. So I don't know what is.
Wayefika nethumbu inyama yangaphakathi, but ayethanda kakhulu ithumbu.
Okay.
And then alose or normal toss, and then he would call us, his kids, and we'd all gather skuqela by the table, abege on a chopping board, fage a little bit of salt for us to stop, and then
chilies. I think
chilies,
chili,
his chilies. It's funny because of late, I think started about 2 years ago. Just have this fascination with chilies. I eat everything with chilies.
It's him talking.
Eat everything with chilies.
Because you say in the book you were fascinated by how he took this thing like sweets. He was just chowing it.
Exactly. And those were the fond memories of him calling us together to share a meal together. His favorite meal together. Because it wasn't just about a meal. It was about his favorite meal.
Do he passed on. Geez, man, there's a story in the book about when he was unemployed and your mom was working. What is it that he used to do in the evening? That was like, whoa, no way.
Mom used to do the laundry on Fridays.
Yeah.
But what she would do is she would soak it and then soak it so that it's easier to wash in the morning, and then she'd wash it in the morning and hang out to dry. And sometimes mom would come back from work and she's tired and she soaks the laundry, she goes to bed, and Ubaba would go and wash the laundry for her.
In the middle of the
night. And then he would wash, rinse, and then leave it there for her to hang out. Well, he couldn't hang it out as a man.
The washing happens in the house where
nobody can see, but you can hang it out. But so those were some beautiful gestures.
I looked at that and said that a Zulu man is known, whether right or wrong, not to play in that space at all. Whether the perspective is wrong, that's how we see it. And this is probably why he wasn't doing the washing outside. Surely that must have been hard for him to pull off, even in the household, because there were still eyes watching, and those eyes were yours as kids and the wife. Is there a reference to that at all in your memory about how it may have made him feel, or it may have made him feel, or what you saw, or what you remember as a father who was going against everything society was saying he should be doing, which is washing impahla. Umfazi akhona alele
but asebenza.
I know, that's why I want you to tell me what that moment meant.
That's such a hard question. I don't know what must have gone through his head. I don't know what emotions he may have been feeling. I think when we love enough, love compels us to do things that are outside of whatever makes us comfortable. So I look at things like that and I think love compelled him. Love pushed him. Because in those moments, it wasn't about men or not, culture or not culture. It was about the truth in the reality of this situation that says, I have a hardworking wife. I'm sick. I can't provide, but I can do this. And I think it says a lot about him as a man because it tells me that he was a truthful man. Like iqiniso, guys. Kunzima la. I can't do A, B, and C, but I can do X. Yeah.
I'm not able to provide financially,
but
I can. Yes. Yes.
And it's interesting as you asked that, David, because I'm thinking how ironic that, remember, Umawaki is the same grandmother
that had
a different school of thought.
You know?
And so it brings me back to the thing I always say. Culture is culture, but culture is created by people.
Yep.
And culture can be changed by people.
You say that very prominently in the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Created by people and can be changed by people. And culture evolves. It's not about a narrative that we must follow to eternity because izinto zazenziwa kanjalo. We have to assess and see, are times different?
Does it still work?
Are we different? Yeah. Does it work? And most importantly, ngiyakha noma ngiyabhidliza, which is at the core of who we are as humanity.
At the core of the decision you're making in the moment
in
as
the
well.
Moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That imagine he could have slept.
Yeah.
And your mom would grind and go to work, come back, ainzi washing.
And create a bitter wife.
Yes.
And then busuti culture. No.
No.
That was your choice. That was
that moment.
Your decision.
Yeah.
That was you.
Amazing. How he passed on. I want to leave it so people will buy more of the book.
Okay.
What about this? What is this family curse of men that don't live long? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Tell me more about it, because it seems to have a number as well.
So I didn't know about the curse, I think, until after my dad died.
Okay.
I started to hear more and more about this curse, and of course observing just how anxious my grandmother was about her boys, meaning my brothers. But also, again, I'm realizing this as we're having the conversation, maybe that was partly what made her feel like she needed to invest more in them, because there was this thing that she knew was a spiritual curse of some sort. So we'd come to know about this curse and the men dying young, the men dying young in the family and at their prime. So my grandfather's brother, so it was young, at their prime, and brutally.
Ooh. Not dying in their sleep.
No, it's not. It's not it's not like you had a stroke and. My grandfather's brother, then my grandfather was murdered by his friends.
Sure.
My dad's youngest brother, who was murdered by an ex-family member. Wow. Somebody was married into the family.
Okay.
Again, brutally stabbed. And then, of course, my father. Then, there was talk of this curse. I don't think I'm at liberty to talk in depth about it.
But
because obviously we knew that there was this thing. And my dad had said to my mom, so this is now my mom relating the story after dad had passed, that he kept saying to her, because my dad passed away at 39. He was 39 when he passed. He was very young.
Very young.
And he kept saying to her, I'm not going to reach 40.
Sure. So he said those words.
He said those words. He said he's not going to reach 40. In the conversations that they were having, and he would plan his funeral.
Wow. At the age of 39.
Yeah.
He was talking
about, I want so-and-so to speak on behalf of, and 2 weeks before his passing.
He had that conversation.
In bed with my mother about how his funeral should unfold. And then, of course, 2 weeks later, he's murdered by somebody who's a relative, somebody who wasn't blood relative, but MaNgubane, but also somebody that we knew.
Mm-hmm. Supposedly and friend as well.
Friend.
Wow.
It was a serious betrayal. And it happened at a time when things had turned around for him. So he was going to start a new job when
it's
this
the prime
happened.
Thing.
He was going to start a new job.
Oh, man.
When that happened.
That part of the story made me teary.
And that... I think I didn't realize how much it broke my mother. And when you're kids, you always look at your parents as if like they're old, like they're really old. And then you look at yourself
and huge.
And huge.
Yeah, they're big human beings. Like these, you look at them like this.
And I got an appreciation of the kind of trauma, pain my mother must have gone through, because she was 40.
Oh, young as well, eh?
Yeah.
Jeez.
I'm older than her.
A young wife.
A young wife with 3 kids.
Yeah.
And it just turned her world upside down. Till today, I mean, my son, who's 7, Mpilo, he has been asking, would ask questions about Gogo's husband, ubano babu wako, upu babu wako. So recently when we were home, he asked my mom about uphu umkhweyana wako. And so umkhweyana wako ubaba ka mama wam.
Yeah, there you go. There's a child figuring out
figuring this thing about where is he alone. And so mom tries to explain to him that he passed on, and he wants to know, he's quizzing, how did he pass on? And mom says no, it was I think she told him stabbed or whatever, but anyway. Then my son tells me, because he's asking me, "Uphu baba wako again?" Okay. And I'm like, "No, baba kasekho." And when he sees pictures, "Oh yeah, nalo baba wako." And then he says, "Yeah, cause ugogo ungitshelile ukuthi ubaba wako ushonile, and ugogo wakhala." And
or maybe
I was,
when she was telling the story.
Yes, when she was telling the story, it was interesting. Not really interesting, but I noted again that. Because I'd stopped speaking about my father to my mother after realizing that I would try to speak to her about, because you want to know certain things, and she doesn't really want to talk about them. And at some point I remember confronting her and saying, but remember, I don't know him like that. You knew him, and sometimes it's hard to get this information out of you, and I wish you would just talk about him.
Which reflects the pain still.
Yeah, I remember the time years ago when she said to me, she sat like this and she bowed her head, and I'm sure the tears were stinging, and she said, because kusabhlungu. And it was years later. Jeez. Years. I mean, my dad's almost passed on now for almost 30 years. Yeah. But the pain
still,
she hasn't quite processed. So when Pilos told me that, when she told me she cried, I realized just how deeply that passing affected her.
And because your mom is strong, so strong that Doe's story is not left out when she got arrested.
Yeah.
For me, I look at that and say, whoa, there's a strong woman there.
Yeah.
Relate that story to us about your mom, and now relate it not as a child, but as an adult, because I realized there are 2 perspectives.
Yes.
It's the story she told you as a young child. And the reality, which is very different.
We'd come back from grocery shopping, and sasahlala kwaMashu kwaJay, and unpacked the groceries. If I'm not mistaken, we'd done the groceries at Pick and Pay. There was this hypermarket, this huge hypermarket in Durban North. We would do the groceries. We came back. Then kwafika amaphoyisa. Dogs, cops, which wasn't, now on reflection, I realized it wasn't like something that we didn't know or used to. We'd had cops come and raid because of the brothers who were exiled and brothers who were in MK and coming in and out. So it's a scene that we knew so much familiar. So that familiar. And my dad was very scared of police. Okay. And as a result, I grew up with an anxiety and thing around cops. So even when I was stopped by traffic cops, I would go into a panic state. Oh, no. And I had to work through that trauma because my response was always of just complete, like I would just go into a state. Wow. And I realized that it was linked to that.
Because all of those things happened when you were very young.
Yes, when we were very young. So I remember they came and questioned her and then took her with. We didn't see her like for the night. We slept. I don't remember what I say in the book, but I think we slept alone. Yes. And she came back in the morning.
Following morning, yeah.
She came back looking like a hot mess. Whoa. The following morning. So I understand when you've been electrocuted, how you would look. Her hair was everywhere.
What was the reason for
They were looking for her brother.
Who was
MK, yeah.
They wanted her to tell where.
They wanted her to tell them where he was. So she comes back and we're like, where were you? And she said, no, she stole something at the Pick and Pay. And they came looking for her.
That's the story she told.
That's the story she told us. And I'm like, what? She stole what? But they realized it wasn't her or whatnot, and they released her.
And you believed it.
And I believed the story. I'm thinking about this thing much later on. I'm like, nah. How did they know where she lived?
Yeah.
That makes no sense.
Oh, hell.
Did she
ever tell the story?
She did tell the story.
Okay.
So that's how, because I had, you know how as children you have profound memories that are stored somewhere in your memory box. And then every now and again, something will trigger the memory. Yeah. And I don't know what had triggered that memory. And I went and I asked her what had happened. And she told me the story. She eventually was brave enough to say, no, I'd gone and Jeez. I was properly dealt with.
She's been a political prisoner. She's been tortured?
Yeah, she was tortured, properly tortured.
Yes. That's crazy.
She was properly tortured.
Wow. That's why when you speak about the pain that she still feels for your dad today, I reflect to the strength that she equally possesses for having gone through an overnight torture by the Afrikaner apartheid police and walked away and still continued to be a normal human being, essentially. We may not know what that has done to her. We may not know how that has affected her because one, you were not there to see what really happened in that torture room. But we see these things in movies, not in reality. And your mom has gone through something like that. That's just crazy.
My mom's definitely strong.
Yeah.
And for a long time, I glorified the strength narrative in women.
Why do you say it like it's in the past?
Because, again, as we evolve and we get to understand just a little bit more about ourselves and how the world works, I think the strength narrative that we attribute to women takes away from their true power. Because we're constantly at war with something. True. Strength is a posture of war.
True.
It's not a posture of being. Power is different. And so I've come to the realization that for a long time we've glorified the strength narrative in women, which is a misleading narrative because it takes away from who we truly are, in our power, in our being, in our identity. And we've made the strength narrative so much of our identity that as women we're silwani. Why are we constantly at war?
Why Nilo at all?
Why at all?
Yes.
Right? And so I say generically, it's not just about my mother. And I think that's the sad thing for me and the tragedy for me is that we live so much of our lives through strength. and never get to realize our true power.
You spend your whole
lives
at war.
And we don't see it in that way because strength is glorified. It's like glorifying poverty, like you know, it's yeah.
We shouldn't ever get there.
Yeah. And I've come to appreciate that. And for me, I look at my mom and I think, gosh, she's so strong. If only she knew how powerful she is, because I feel like she carries so much. Yeah. And remember, as women, we carry so much. We carry pain well. We wear neglect well.
Hey.
We embrace so many toxicities so well. We carry them so well.
In the workplace, name it, everywhere.
Disrespect.
Yes.
We wear it all so well.
Yeah.
And I'm really tired of the strength narrative around women, because I think it displaces us.
The war has to stop.
What
is your memory of life after your dad's passing?
Tough. Tough.
What about it? And I asked this very innocently. He was already not working, as in he wasn't providing, so to speak. He was providing in ways that he could. And now he's no longer around. Not that providing is the only thing his presence brought in. It's not. But what is it about? What is the tough that you speak of in this context?
When I lost my dad, I lost both parents because my mom was emotionally unavailable. I still go to therapy for that.
Yes.
And it's not anything that you blame her for. She was a young wife. She became widowed at 40 with 3 kids. I look at that and I think, I don't know if I could do that. People talk about when somebody passes away, a certain part of you dies with them. For my mom, it wasn't just a portion. A lot of her died with my dad.
Whoa.
And that's hard for the children, because you still got a parent.
True. Still have to be emotionally present.
Yeah, you still got a parent. And I think she did the best she could with what she had.
Yeah.
And tried to maintain a good life, sustain us. But it became very clear to me that if this family was going to survive, I would have to
step up.
I'd have to step up. And so there is a responsibility that was placed on me to step up.
The effect on your brothers?
They don't talk about it.
Whoa. That is a huge effect.
Yeah. They don't talk about it. It's not, I wish we could go to therapy together as a family, because I'd like to know what they think, where they are emotionally. I know it affected them a lot, but they don't talk about it.
Whoa.
And it would be hard to get them to open up about it.
So many years later. Yeah.
You can see that it still affects them. As a girl child growing up in Lokshini, muzo ngena baba awuhlonishwa. So for me, I'm pretty, so izesheli zaziningi. But now it was like it became a lot more aggressive.
Really?
Like who you gonna tell? You don't have your daddy ain't around. Who you gonna tell?
Wow.
So,
I didn't know that theory.
Yeah. So it became literally I felt like I had no male protector around me.
Yeah.
And it affected how I showed up in the world. I mean, it's like I say, I'm in therapy.
I still
deal with that stuff about my strong dominant persona, but also how I feel like I always have to protect myself. Your
immediate reaction is that of guarding up. Yes. In most situations, is that what it is?
In most situations. And so much so that people think I'm always fighting.
Oh boy.
Like musugulwa. And I realize it's a posture.
Yes.
It's a posture of war, because I was constantly at war with boys. I was constantly at war with, it's a posture of
fighting
war. Fighting off, and also
it's a tough life.
It's also the not wanting to be disrespected.
Yes.
So that's a trigger for me. So when I feel disrespected, I'm triggered negatively, because it feels like you're disrespecting the girl child who didn't have a father.
Do you know chapter 6 or 7 that disrespects about race. And you did say that you could have written 20 more chapters of your perspective of life, because it comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes. And there you're dealing with racism in the workplace. And I remember reading that thinking, you're consumed by this. Relax. Relax. These people will never love you. Move on. But he was so caught up in the racism that, are you still like that? In a lot of spaces? Do you still have the guard up approach? Or something that you've worked on with time?
I've worked on it with time. I don't think I'm there yet. I think what helps is to stop and just process.
Yeah.
Whose voice are you hearing and who's it triggering? Am I hearing the voice of Isesheli that wanted to have his way with me? And is it triggering the little girl? And I'm nowhere near perfection when it comes to it. I'm not even close to 50% perfection when it comes to it.
Yeah.
It's a constant struggle. So much of it is who I am, because it's how I'm conditioned, it's how I'm socialized. But it helps to pause. It helps to pause. I don't always pause because just naturally my personality, I shoot from the hip. So sometimes I'm like, yeah, uyalwa. What are you?
Oh, shayala.
You know what I mean? So I'm better because I'm at a place where I can self-reflect.
Okay.
And I think that makes it better. And the acknowledgement that you have issues.
You know, there's a phrase, it's such a useless phrase. But yaganayo iwo. Agana wo. But whoa. Oh man. Do you think you have a little bit now?
Yeah.
Oh, whoa. Not here.
I do.
That's good.
And part of why I moved to Emaplazini is exactly that. I needed to be in a space, apart from feeling like the walls were closing in on me in the buzz of Joburg and the suburbs, and I just needed a space where I could breathe. You know, like go outside and look at the hills and just breathe.
Yeah.
And I get to do a lot of that. And I think just pacing myself, because sometimes when you're in the rat race, you don't have time to process.
No way.
And so you just keep going and going and going.
Yeah.
And you react immediately.
I've done that for 40 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm content with being able to pace myself without judging myself as not being productive. I came across a quote that said even self-care is productive.
That's it. Wow.
So I'm okay with that now, because I understand how important that is for me to be better as a person, as a mom, as a partner, in all of these things, to be better and for myself.
That's it. Everybody wins.
Yeah, everybody wins.
In that environment, with that state of mind.
Yeah.
Do you know, you make reference to your mom and obviously your dad, but your dad's passing. Traditionally, women were black, and it's something that stands out in the book that your mom didn't.
Yeah.
That's how it used to be.
Yeah.
And interesting, I was having a chat here with a healer, and we were reflecting on some of the things that we used to do and we don't anymore. And your mom, at that age, that many years ago, it was expected. Why is it that she didn't?
Because my father told her not to.
Whoa. Said before he passed on.
Yeah,
said you're not
before he
going to
passed
do
on,
that.
said, no, don't have to do that. They didn't have a traditional marriage that was founded on cultural values. They had their own thing, and they got it.
Yeah,
I mean,
it worked.
It worked for them.
Yeah.
I mean, there were quarrels around me when I was getting married, expectations and cultural expectations and whatnot. And I remember I was so fed up. I went to my mom and I said, what would my dad have said? What would he have done? Mom said, and by this time, remember, everybody knows him better than his wife.
Of course.
Everybody knows him better than his wife.
It's always like that.
And as I went to her and I said, what would my dad have done? What would he have said to me? And mom said, your dad would have listened to you and he would have done what you asked him to do.
Yeah.
He would have done it exactly the way
Would
that
have
you
respected your
would have
opinion.
respected your opinion. And I believe that because I believed it because their marriage was that reference for me. So him and her had their own thing. He said to her, you don't have to do that. You don't have to wear black for me. Don't wear. I actually need to go deeper into the story because I don't know if he had an issue with it or
naself,
or what it was.
Yes.
But he was like, you don't need to do that.
Yeah.
So she did the whole madrasi thing. But after that, she went back to work and she was A-okay.
Life carries on.
Life carries on.
Jeez. Well, it continues to be tough, but it carried on.
It carried on.
Has she ever thought of getting married again?
Ish.
Do the best you can to answer it.
I think she's lonely. Let me say, I wish now it would have been difficult then for us
as young kids.
Yeah. But I think now I wish she would find somebody.
Yeah.
Even if this person, I really at this point doesn't matter, move in, whatever. But she's lonely, and that's why the plan now is to move her from the original house home, where home is back home, Emakaya, Eshowe, where her older sister and younger sister now are, because then they're all on the same homestead. So there's a plan to get her own place and all of that. But it gets very lonely.
Yeah.
And like, wazi yonke le nyomfa khona ka TV, like like these, the Bachelorettes, the Bachelor, it's
exactly.
like what?
My mom knows all of that stuff as well. What else do they do with their time though?
Exactly. I think she's lonely, and I look at it and I think it's a sad life. It's a sad life to not have that kind of companionship, especially in your old age. So yeah, I wish she would find someone. She had some company.
Yeah. Do you know, there's something you say about men don't mourn, and not in those words. I'm paraphrasing. Women mourn their husband's death. It's a thing. For men, it's not expected of them to mourn the wife's death. Like it won't be shocking for a man to move on a few weeks later, but it would be the biggest deal if the wife would move on quickly.
It won't just be a big deal. She would have killed him.
That
confirms that she would have killed him.
Yeah.
Right? Because the narrative had always been that, and a very open narrative. It's not like it was a secret that if your husband dies, you're the first suspect.
Ooh, yeah. Well, even in the movies.
Yeah.
That's the narrative.
You're suspect number one.
Yeah.
A little bit different for men. And then, you can't move on with your life. Even a year later is too quick. Because I get when you're made of steel and
you're special.
You're special. You're a special child.
Yes.
When you don't have needs.
No.
Yeah. So you can't. So it's all of those things, the different standards.
And that remains even now.
Yeah. But ubaba next door, let the wife pass on. We are all queuing. And as the women, that thing about women again perpetuating the narrative, right? As women, those who are available, we are queuing up as competition. Somebody must go in.
Whoa.
And it like this can't be a week after the funeral, guys. Like we're moving before the funeral. And
crazy.
You know what I mean? And it's okay because Nkosi yami, mayisemtholile, it's like, siyabonga Nkosi yami, ubab David azamthole naye umuntu Nkosi yami, angabi lonely Nkosi yami, to take care of.
That's unfair though.
It is.
I know that narrative continues. It's not an old thing. We're not reflecting on the past. We're talking about kapiliso.
Kapiliso.
Yes.
Even a year later is kapiliso. Even 3 years later is kapiliso.
What happened to this lady? How about you? That we won't overcome, not anytime soon. So much hasn't changed. And that it's not high on the order of things that need to change. That much I can tell you.
Yeah. It's so much hasn't changed. It's probably not going to change in this generation.
Yeah.
I think as we continue to teach our children differently, we'll see a lot of those changes. I mean, my boys treat me the same way I want them to treat their wives.
Yes.
You know, like when I come home, as soon as the car parks, the boys are out there, groceries, don't.
Whatever that needs to be
If you are
carried.
carrying, it's like, no, don't carry. You know, mom has done eating, batati plate, balhambise kishini. You know, my boys do that for me.
Do you know that theme comes across strongly when you talk about cheating?
Mm-hmm.
That women are very easy to forgive.
Mm.
And I use the word easy in inverted commas because I really think women don't forgive cheating. And as you put it, they don't forgive someone who continues to be a cheat. They will revenge. That's my theory.
Okay.
And you also reflect on something like that. But you say there's something to be said about how women are not taught how to love or how to be loved. And you seem to be doing that already with your boys. Because it's twofold.
Yeah.
Women are not taught how to be loved. So they don't have a standard that they are measuring against. You can blame fatherlessness. Because for me, it's not only fatherlessness, it's also what the mother has taught to the child, which is what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then you can look at a flip side of it and say the boy, child, how was he taught to love? Because that's also another thing to consider. And you spend a lot of time on that subject.
I'm intentional about it.
Yeah.
Even in the way that I do it. I'm very intentional about it. Because it was Michelle Obama who said girls are taught to be responsible and girls are taught to be responsible and boys are protected. And then I add on and say, and then the same boy who was protected must marry the responsible girl. It's a recipe for disaster.
It's not going to work.
It's a recipe for disaster. So I'm very intentional about what I'm teaching them and not by telling them, because children are not taught by what we tell them. Speech. They by speech. They have to see it in action. I'm very intentional about that because I understand that they're going to marry somebody's daughter.
That's true.
Somebody's daughter. And I don't want that coming back to me and becoming my issue and my problem. I don't want it becoming my issue and my problem. Apart from the fact that I just believe women must be treated well.
Yeah.
Respectfully, loved, adored, appreciated, given attention and time. I just don't want somebody's child coming into my space and my family and finding there's a problem. But here I am, Minas, talking about it publicly as if,
Yeah,
so
you're practicing it.
I'm practicing it.
Yeah.
And I can only do the best I can.
That's true.
It's not to say that they'll turn out the way that I intend for them to turn out. Yeah. I can only do what I can do. And then people decide what they do with their lives later. And I hope and pray that they will come back to the ways that they were taught, the right ways that they were taught. But I can't guarantee anything, but I can put in the work here now.
Do you know, there's a phrase I heard once that says, if you miss parenting them when they are young, you're going to parent them when they're old. You'll never avoid parenting kids. They will become kids at some point. The truth about them will show itself. And now you'll be saying, man, I should have done this when he was 10. I should have done this
when he was 10.
Look at him now, he's 40.
Yep.
Jeez. Yeah. No, you reflect on that quite strongly. And I really like it.
Yeah.
That you spend time on, be careful how you teach love to your kids. Because they will expect it. And if it's the wrong version, they will be waiting for it. For whether it's toxic love, that's what
they know.
That's the bar they have.
The bar.
Oh boy.
That's the gauge. That's the barometer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's hard to undo that stuff, because I think it's psychologists who say personalities or characters built in the first 7 years of a child's life.
That's true.
So it's hard to undo.
Once it's done.
Once it's done, it's done.
Nkosi.
Let me drink some water.
Is he around?
Yeah.
Okay. Is he an active father?
No.
Has he ever been?
Only when I've been a part of the equation.
Okay.
So he's
not on his own.
No, his active parenting came with a condition that I would be a part of the trio.
Okay.
So, Ngosi, and that's not his real name.
I know, it's fine. Interesting. That was my next question. I like how I like when books do that. It's like, damn it, who's this real guy? Who's the guy? Let's go find him.
Yeah,
it's not his real name.
I met him in the township. He was like a cute guy, good looking. I really don't want to give him this airtime, but
no, it's fine. He dressed well.
He dressed really well. Yes. He dressed really well.
And you were young then.
I was young.
Yeah.
So he was my first.
Jeez.
My first.
Yeah.
And transitioning into being a girl to womanhood, he was all of that. There for the milestones.
Was the lessons.
He was the lessons.
Yeah.
And I thought it would, you as a child, man, you invest and you think, you invest your time, you think, this is going to work. We're going to grow all together. And
of course,
by the time I fell pregnant with my daughter, Ayapiwa, he was already thrust into that life of gangsterism, which came as a surprise to me because I was already in the relationship with him.
Yeah.
And then he tried to hide it. And then I think eventually it was like, there's no way you can hide this because it stopped going to school and wanted the fast life. Yeah. And again, the whole reference for power for him was his older brother, who was a very feared gangster.
Whoa.
And he adored him. He worshipped the ground.
That was the role model.
That was the role model.
Yeah.
And so many opportunities that were afforded to him of a different life,
really?
A better life, that he just didn't. His brother bought him a Matchbox BMW 323, a blue. I still remember. That thing took me to my matric dance.
Wow, listen to that.
You know what I mean?
And he was still relatively young at the time.
He was young. He was doing his first year in tertiary.
Yeah.
And his older brother, because he didn't want him to fall into that life of crime, said, I don't want you to do what I'm doing.
Okay. Oh, he tried to stop him.
So he tried to stop him. So he said, Naimoto.
Yeah, let me give you the stuff. But you don't have to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, that thing took me to my matric dance. Okay. So there were so many attempts to try and divert his life into a different path, but he chose not to.
Was he ever arrested?
Many times.
While you were a girlfriend? Did that happen while you were a girlfriend?
Yeah. So when I was 4 months pregnant,
whoa,
he was arrested. That was, I think, the longest one.
Is it the MLO one?
Yes, the MLO one. Yeah. So I was not 4 months pregnant. My daughter was 4 months. When he was arrested.
Okay. Jeez.
And he was there for, I think, like 2.5, 3 years.
That's long, yeah. For a young dad. Yeah. Did he acknowledge his role then as a father? Because I call him a young dad, but was he aware that he was a young dad?
Yeah.
He was conscious of it.
I'll never forget. I mean, I told my daughter this because I tried to preserve for the many years before eventually she would have to know the truth. Preserve his image.
Of course.
And when I gave birth, so he did the hospital, the doctor visits with me. He wasn't there when I gave birth.
Yes.
But when I'd given birth, he provided everything that the child would need.
Did you ever talk to him about why he didn't come to visit during the few days when you had just given birth?
Why your pant?
Oh, yappies. Yaspana. It's not complicated.
It's not complicated. Yes. And that's why I know that he was very conscious about the fact that he was a dad.
Because he said,
I need to buy stuff. And it was clothes, it was everything. It was everything you would have thought of for a and stuff that for a newborn and stuff that I didn't even know I needed. But some girl friend of his, a female friend of his had gone with him to do the shopping.
Whoa.
And the car just came and dropped everything off. So I think he knew, and I think he tried. He wanted to be a good dad.
Ever had a conversation with him about trying and succeeding? Because I think you're the type that could convince him that you can do it.
About 2 years ago, we were presented with that opportunity. He hadn't seen his daughter in 13 years. And we were provided with that opportunity, but he bailed out.
He didn't take it.
We had the appointment set up, but of course this is not going to happen in Johannesburg. I have to speak to my husband. Inganega gogo ayaphiwa essentially, so this meeting has to take place at home, so fanele sekhaya and all of that, and
because the roots are there.
Yes, and your mom must come and so the families were going to come together, and I had people driving from different parts of KZN to come and be part of this meeting with my mom. And on the day that we were meant to drive down to Durban, he calls me and says something about he can only be there for 30 minutes. And I said, what do you mean? He said, he has somewhere to go. He can't. So we were like, no, we can't drive 6 hours to Durban and then
when are you
for 30 minutes
for us?
For a child you haven't seen in 13 years. What?
You should say I have a week. I have a week for you.
So we had a fallout, and he was adamant that he could only be there for 30 minutes. The meeting needs to start at 8:30 and he must leave by 9. And that was 2 years ago, and I haven't heard from him since.
Because you're no longer dealing with that young boy.
No, I'm not dealing with that young boy.
Yeah.
I'm dealing with somebody who has multiple children.
You could excuse the young boy for being naive.
Yeah.
But not the older guy.
No.
Sure. So you've never said, daughter, let's try this. What's wrong? Does your daughter ask questions about the father? Which should be expected?
Yeah. I think by the age of, I think 10-ish, I sat her down.
Okay.
And I said to her, whatever you need to ask me, please feel free.
Yeah. Has she stopped asking? She
stopped because she's engaged with him.
Okay.
So they haven't met since she was 4. My daughter's turning 21 this year. They haven't met, but they did engage, and I allowed that relationship to dictate itself.
Yeah.
Right? And I didn't meddle. But because I know him, I could protect her for a certain period as a child, but I knew that there would come a time when she would need to know the truth for herself. And so their engagements revealed that truth for her. And she made her own analysis and made up her own mind about who he was or who he is. I have no part in that. That was her experience. I didn't try to guide it. I didn't try to, I would warn her. She'd come and tell me. I would say maybe not, maybe, but I allowed that thing to unfold. And she experienced it for herself.
Didn't you think, though, you were throwing her in the lion's den at some point?
I did, but there was nothing I could do. I didn't feel like there was anything I could do because I felt like if I don't allow this to be an organic experience for her, one day she would blame me.
But you didn't allow me.
You didn't allow me. You didn't want this. You didn't want that. And I think she was old enough. As I remember saying to her, I could shield you as a child, but I had to gauge whether you were. I don't think anybody's ever emotionally ready for trauma, but whether it was trauma that you could process and that we could work through.
Okay.
And once I could see that she was at that age, I said,
okay,
it's fine.
You go do it. Like jump. Let's out. Like, I know you won't break your legs. Even if you do,
I'll be here.
Yeah.
And I was there.
Jeez. Has it been traumatic for her?
I think so. She goes to therapy.
Only if he knew the impact,
Yeah.
I think absent absent but present dads. And I say present, they're still alive, but they're absent.
Yeah.
They horrible because I don't think they see this from this perspective of this conversation.
Yeah.
You know?
And remember, for us as human beings, belonging, we identify belonging with our dads.
Yeah.
Because that's also the surname that we carry. And so I could never understand the depth of her displacement.
Yeah.
Having married into another family.
Sure.
Because for a long time it was her and mom,
Mm-hmm.
and she had a sense of belonging here. And then this other guy comes, marries me, and then we have children. And she's there. And you know, she's welcomed into the Borotho family. She's loved. She's treated like one of the children, but she doesn't belong there.
Does it play out?
Yeah.
You see it.
Yeah. She's very selfish with me.
Oh.
She's very selfish with me. And I've come to understand where that comes from. I only belong with my mom. And so when other people take my mom away from me, then I feel displaced, because where else do I go? I don't have the stability of ikaya lo malume, because that's not really a relationship that is cemented and solid.
True. You can't run there. Yeah.
I have a koko, but she's in Durban. It's just me and my mom.
So it's the same for her.
It's the same for her. And I have a better appreciation and understanding of that now.
What is it about this time that has made you realize it better? Is it because you are finding out yourself as well?
Oh, unfortunately, it's something happened that I can't talk about.
Okay.
Yeah. Something happened, and that for me gave me the realization that there was more to this or her than it was an issue about belonging. It was an issue of belonging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting because we take for granted, like you're getting everything you want. Your mom is always here.
Yeah.
You have a dad.
Yeah.
May not be your dad, but you have a father. And your dad is around, whom you engage with once in a while. What more do you want?
What more do you want?
But you realize in this conversation that there is a void that you can't pretend doesn't exist.
And I think one of the biggest challenges with modern day parenting is that we try to normalize things, like brush over them, like, no, but you belong in this family now because you relax. This is your father, you know, this is your, you know what I mean? Like, I think.
And there's no continuous engagement.
Yeah, there's a false narrative of belonging that we place on our children instead of just having a truthful conversation about how and recognizing, acknowledging that they feel displaced, that they are displaced.
Yeah.
But I'm going to do the best I can to create an environment into which you belong, and for us to also be okay with them feeling like they're displaced, because it almost feels like they shouldn't feel like they're displaced, and they shouldn't voice it out, and they shouldn't, you know. And I was like that.
Yeah.
I was like that. I was like, no, but you know, because Ubabwake was Ubabwake. It's the only father she's ever, and he's an amazing father to her.
Yeah.
It's the only father she's ever known. An amazing, amazing father. And so I look at the act of this amazing father, and I disregard this little girl who still doesn't understand why her real father rejected her.
Yeah. And she has to deal with that.
She has to deal with that. And she has to deal with that every time I see you, David, as my stepfather, I am reminded of my real father who wasn't there. And that's just the reality.
Every time you do an act of kindness, I wish it was the other guy.
Yeah.
That's a huge burden for a child to carry.
It is a huge burden.
And they carry it for a long, long time. And I've spoken here with people who have told me stories of you never stop carrying that pain forever and ever and ever. Even as an adult, in your old age, there's still a source of pain from that space. I had a chat with Tate Bradon Langeni. And he reflects on that very pain.
Yeah.
And he's not a young man at all.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that little child. I think and that's why the second book is so important for me, because I think with Unbecoming to Become, I deal so much with the societal stuff. So all the external stuff.
Yes.
Right. Maybe a little bit of the internal stuff, but all the socialization, conditioning and all of that.
Yeah.
And with the second book, I'm really delving deep into childhood traumas, the little children who show up as broken adults in the world, because we don't realize how much of those traumas shape who we are. That absent father, or that man who was maybe a present father but you saw as weak.
True. Stuff that they did or didn't do.
Or stuff that they didn't do.
Yeah.
Absent moms, abandonment. So I'm dealing a lot with wounds, childhood wounds, how they manifest, that play out. The sibling wound, around sibling rivalry, the wounds around the siblings that got more attention, the mother wound, the father wound, the friend wound.
Yeah.
I think we're ready for that conversation now.
And it's a conversation that should not happen once.
Yeah.
Do you know, on my radio show not so long ago, I spoke about childhood pregnancy, and it'll lead us straight into the pain that you suffered. And I call it pain because you call it shame. I was talking about, and I said, we don't talk about teenage pregnancy enough in this country. There's a lot of families that experience it. There's a lot of communities that experience it, but there's little conversation about it. And my question was, one, are you engaging with your kids as they are growing on the subject, whether through conversation or through active participation? And some parents called and said, you can do it or not. There's still an opportunity for it to happen because you can't completely close them in. And someone said, I closed her in and she still fell pregnant. And I don't know why and how. So the personality in them will still reflect. But I counter argue and say the right and wrong can still dominate their state of mind, where you say, I shouldn't be there. In your case, you were not a teenager. Or were you? You were not.
I wasn't a teen,
you were
but
not,
I was young.
You were relatively young. You speak about that experience of falling pregnant young as a very shameful experience, not only in your life, but in how society saw you as well. You call it what? What is the name of that chapter? What goods?
Yeah, damaged goods.
Damaged goods.
I was written off.
Oh boy.
It was a complete write-off.
You made it, for the record.
I'm here for the record.
You made it. But at that time, it was quite a big problem. Not necessarily for you, well, not only for you, but for everybody else. Because you have, the church calls you a sinner.
Yeah.
Other guys call you whatever. Like everybody has a pocket of what they would refer to this child.
Now you've had sex, and now we don't know how many times you've actually had sex. And was it the only guy, or have there been other guys? You know, it's all of those things. It's stuff that people filter, and then you receive that. You receive that as a pregnant
young
girl who's scared, actually.
Yeah.
Who's really just scared, who already feels the shame and disappointment that she's brought upon the family. So she don't need none from you.
Yeah. She's already
going through it.
Yeah.
And it's not to say parents can't get angry. It's not to say parents can't get disappointed. Of course you must. Of course you can in that moment in time. But I think to write off and prolong the shameful journey is a lot.
Was it prolonged?
It wasn't prolonged because remember, I only told my mom when I was like 6 months pregnant, I think I was. And I only really saw her, went back home when I was about 8 months.
Okay.
7 to 8 months.
So she didn't quite experience
Yeah, she didn't quite experience the I'm 2 months pregnant thing, and then the journeying, and then maybe accepting it at 7 months when you're like, there's nothing I can do. We had very little time to process this thing. But I think because for me of the expectations on me.
Yeah.
I was the model child
who was going to make it.
Yes, I was the savior. I was the model child, the savior. And now, why you're going to do this? Why you're going to do this? And all of that disappointment rested with me. And that's why I had to fight.
Yeah, there's the war again.
Like, I had to fight. I was at war. I was at war with my predefined or redefined destiny.
Okay.
I was at war with that redefined destiny. I wasn't willing to accept that as
defeat.
As defeat. Because that redefined destiny now became uzoba ingane ezalele ekhaya, uzohlala ekhaya, ubani ozokuqasha, awusebenzi, ubani ozokushada, all of that. And I was like, I'm not going to accept that. I'm going to rise out of this. And as a result, I was 9 months pregnant when I went for that interview.
Yeah, I like that.
And I didn't tell them.
There was a fake accident.
And I didn't tell them that I was 9 months pregnant, and then I'm giving birth and they're ready for me to start work. And I'm like, been in an accident.
When I read that, I was like, wow, that was quick. You thought very fast.
Can't come to work. Give me some time.
You were giving birth.
I was giving birth.
Wow.
I was in hospital giving birth. And 3 weeks later. Yes, but Dudu had seen. Yes. Dudu saw me when I arrived for the interview.
Yeah.
And she said to me much later, like, what?
How did they miss that you were pregnant? They didn't miss it. Or they
I almost said something so like.
They just thought you were big.
Look, I was tiny then.
Okay.
My belly should have been obvious. I don't know how they missed it. I mean, I tried to cover up, and they definitely missed it.
So you were conscious.
I was very conscious about covering up.
See.
I didn't want them to see that I was pregnant.
Yeah.
Marutu. There was Tutu came with the tea. Then she was like,
"You're pregnant." And it was for interview.
And it was like, what the hell?
And you got the job.
And I got the job. And 3 weeks later. With the 3-week baby, I board a bus back to Joburg and I start working.
How did you look after the child?
A friend of mine came up with me. She wasn't, she'd finished school, but she wasn't working. And she said, I'll help you. I'll come stay with you and I'll help you. And I'll look for a job in Joburg. So that's how she was staying with the baby. And she was looking for work as soon as she had found some work, and then I had to find a nanny. And
I guess it speaks to the very point that you said that you're not going to be defeated by this thing.
No, like I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't like Piwa was mine.
Yes,
Piwa was mine.
You
my
embraced
responsibility.
Motherhood.
Yeah, she was. When friends were going to have their nails done, Nina was thinking, "Hey, ubisi guys."
Jeez.
Ubisi guys, amapempas guys. I embraced motherhood. She was my I had created the situation.
Yeah.
And I had to step up in the situation.
Did Gosi play a role?
Well,
besides buying the first things that he bought? The travel to Joburg to see my son, my daughter?
He did. He traveled. Remember, he was arrested when my daughter was 4 months.
Yeah. Oh.
So okay. It was literally, he came every day to see her when I was in Durban.
Okay.
He came almost every day to see her. In the evenings, he would come and spend time with her. He then obviously I left to start work, and I think we must have seen him maybe, I don't remember now, maybe 2 or 3 times after that, and then never saw him again.
It's amazing. I wish you could preserve that guy that came every day.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and he was so in love with her. He would sit and hold her like this, like, and he would shake and be like, she's so tiny, she's so small. Like, am I holding her? Show me how to hold her. He was very gentle with her. And
obviously first child as well for him. Because he was also a young boy.
Yes. And he loved her. He loved her dearly. And he checked in on her. He was there. He was present.
Your mom didn't take your pregnancy well.
Yeah. No, my mom didn't take my
Your
pregnancy.
loving mom did not take your pregnancy well at all in the beginning.
No, she didn't. I mean, the way I informed her about the pregnancy was disrespectful on hindsight.
Yeah.
I called her, I sent a message because she didn't have a cell phone. I didn't have a cell phone. She didn't have a cell phone. I sent a message to say she needs to call me. And so every time mom had to call me for an emergency or whatever, she'd have to take a taxi to Guamashu station.
Wow. To a payphone.
To a payphone. That was the only way she could call me.
Yeah.
And she boarded a taxi to Guamashu because she thought it was something urgent that I needed to call her. And then I break the news that I'm 6 months pregnant. And her response was, you basically got me to board a taxi all the way here to tell me this nonsense.
Justice.
And she hung up.
Did you hear from her any time soon after that?
No.
She left this thing.
Gone.
And how did you feel?
I got it.
You got it?
Yeah.
That's
why I prolonged it. That's why I prolonged telling her. I understood what I had done. Nothing pushed me to those circumstances. My mother was a social worker by profession. She spoke about sex and boys and pregnancies and all of these things.
Yeah.
So true to what one of the callers was saying, you can shield it, you can talk about it, it doesn't matter. In that moment in time, something happens.
Yeah.
And then it happened. Yeah. You can do the best you can. There is nothing that my mother could have said to me that was any different that would have made me behave differently in that moment, because that moment happened. And having happened, I didn't have the intellect to go and buy a morning after pill. Nothing. You know what I mean? Like nothing. Like I just let this thing, and I kind of don't even know what consumes young girls in that moment. I sometimes think maybe it's time. Is it because it's meant to happen? I don't know, because is it a life force that is pushing through you and wants to come through life through? You know what I mean?
Who knows?
Is it
That could be the reason.
That could be the reason, because something consumes our intellect. You could have condomized
many things. You could have
been on the pill.
You could have avoided the day after.
The day after, you still 72 hours.
72 hours. It's a 5-day one now, by the way.
Oh, it's the 5-day one.
Yeah. I know too much.
You know too much.
There's even one that you can take to avoid getting HIV.
Yes, that one I know about.
There's all sorts of things.
There's all sorts of things.
Yes.
So I had no excuse. And that's why I understood. I had no excuse from the self-infliction.
Yes.
But even more from having had an open relationship with my mother about these things, about sex. Yeah.
And a child was there now.
Yeah.
But
she brought so much joy.
Yeah, your mom turned around. Oh, when I saw that in the book, it's like, I'm glad. Because I was worried that she's going to leave you. Because there's a phrase there, you say, before I phoned her, I was lonely. And after I called her and she put the phone down, I felt alone. I remember thinking, oh no. Yeah, like I say, when I was reading a book, I was watching a movie. Like, oh, look at her now. There she goes alone at this.
Yeah.
She turned around completely.
She did a complete turnaround.
Mothers do that though.
Mothers do. I don't know if it's mothers. I think New Life does that.
Yeah.
I think it's hard for... It would be hard to hold on to the emotions of anger, pain, resentment, or whatever it is when there's a new life being birthed.
Yeah.
I think that life comes with a different wave, fresh emotions for everybody. It's almost like the slate is wiped clean.
That's why I get shocked at men that stay in that state and not want to see the child. And that for me, really, because no one has ever described it that clearly for me, that it's the new thing, the new energy in the room that nobody recognizes, because it's this human being is coming with this new thing. And everybody else is so happy.
And my brothers are turned around. You remember, I don't know if I relate the story, but I mean, my twin brother wanted to beat me up.
No, you don't say that. Was he upset?
Oh my God. And I'm thinking, We are pulls away.
And I just made a baby. Relax.
Chill. He was depressed.
Oh no.
Yeah, he went through a whole host of emotions. Yes. He was like disappointed.
Oh no.
Like he was. And he made me know and made me feel it.
I think I was the same with my younger sister. When she fell pregnant, I was not happy. But I didn't make her feel it, as you put it.
No, he made me feel it. There's a day he came home and he was ready to kill me.
Whoa.
And mom had to kind of separate us because I was ready to fight. Also, it was like, wow, now like I'm sabi type of thing. Like, what you gonna do?
Jeez.
But the day we were discharged from hospital, because we were supposed to be discharged, and then they picked up minor jaundice in Piwa, and so we stayed another day. But that day when we were supposed to be discharged, mom then comes back and says to me, they were sitting waiting for her.
Okay.
And they were so they were just so disappointed. They were sitting waiting in anticipation of the baby. And they were just so disappointed that the baby didn't come today, and they left. And then the next day when I came with the baby, they was home waiting for the baby. And
melted.
Absolutely
all the
melted.
Anger goes away.
Gone.
Amazing.
Melted.
New
melted.
Life.
The day I went into labor, my younger brother was laughing at me.
Why?
Because it's like, yeah, well,
you wanted it.
Type of thing.
Wow.
And I'm, oh my God, I remember this so well. I'm in intense labor pains. And I'd read somewhere that if you take a bath, if you take a bath, it kind of eases the pains. I took a hot bath. It's supposed to be a cold bath.
Oh no.
It eases the contractions. I took a hot bath. The hot bath actually accelerates the contractions.
Yeah. So you did the exact opposite.
I did the exact opposite. So I'm in the bath. My mom's on the phone to her sister who was in the US. And mom's like, because we didn't have a car. So my twin brother had gone to try and arrange transport to take me. And we can't get hold of the one who's responsible because you're part.
Yeah.
Right? Because the car was always supposed to be there. Right? But he's not ready for me. But now, and my younger brother is watching Generations.
While all this is happening.
And he's just laughing. Like, yeah, you. So mom is on the phone to her sister who's a nurse. And the sister says, no, it looks like it's coming down because she's in a bath. So she says, is it a cold bath? And she says, no, it's a hot bath. He said, yeah, keep at him. Keep at him. That baby's gonna come now.
Oh no.
And so I had to, get out of the bath. And by then the contractions were just, and so, I mean, Piwa's delivery was a film. A real movie, because I got into this car that they'd found, and then and this thing is just a skorokoro. It's going at like 20 kilometers per hour, and I'm just like, move! I am shouting from the back. I'm just like, move! And I could literally feel her head.
Yes.
Right. So I keep saying to my mom, she's here, like the head, and I'm touching and I'm feeling that because my water broke, but I didn't realize that my water had broken because you have this idea of water breaking from the reference in the movies where water gushes out.
Yes.
But my water had broken very lightly, And so I'm like, this baby's here. And that's part of why they actually wouldn't send the ambulance because I gave birth, was Entabeni, was Saint Augustine Hospital, one of the Netcare ones. And they wouldn't send the ambulance because they kept asking, has my water broken? I said, no. And they said, no, then you're not in labor, you're fine.
Yes.
And I'm like, I didn't realize the water had broken.
Wow. Now it's korokoro.
Yeah, so now, dude, and he's not having none of it. And ubaba mdala, wangasekhaya.
He's not in
so
the
now
you know that sticker?
Yeah.
If you're not, if you're in a hurry, doesn't mean
I'm not in a hurry. This is just pissing him off. He just keeps giving me these jabs, Eventually we get to the hospital and my mom is like screaming for help. As soon as my doctor was already, my gynecologist was already at the hospital waiting because I'd called him to say I'm giving birth. But I'd just seen him that morning. And it was weird because he said to me, okay, you're going to give birth today. No, you're going to give birth this week.
Okay.
I imagine this baby will come by the end of the week. Are all your hospital things in order? And I'm like,
Great.
Everything is in order.
Yeah.
So I go back home. It's mom's birthday on a Monday. No, it was mom's birthday the day before Sunday. It's the 6th of May on the Monday.
Yeah.
And then we get to the hospital. I'm put into a wheelchair. The nurse rushes me because the doctor had already told her that I have a patient coming. It's an emergency.
Okay.
And so they're waiting for me at the labor ward. I'm whisked through into the lift up. As I arrive, literally my doctor receives me from the lift. They quickly whisk me into the labor room. I'm put on the bed. And
where's mommy?
Mommy's still filling in the details downstairs, like the admin. She's still doing the admin. I can hear her because she had called my cousin brother's wife, who's a doula, right? And she wanted to be there for the birth, and she'd asked, "Can I be there for the birth?" and whatever. She was from the States. She'd married her from the States when they were in exile, and so she was doing all these weird things that we weren't used to, unfamiliar with. So she wanted to be my doula, and so mom is speaking to her, Masia,
come
and
quickly.
she's like, "Yeah, come," and then she pauses. I can hear her from the passage. She says, "Wait, whose baby is that?" Because Piwa was already out and crying.
Oh, no.
Everything was so quick.
She didn't even see that. She was busy completing forms.
And by the time she got to the labor ward or labor room,
you were done.
She dived out. Piwa dived out. I pushed once and she dived out.
What? When other people will tell
my
you...
my gynae was still putting on his gloves when he held, like he literally like did this. Whoo!
Do you realize that easily could have given birth in that store?
I could have. And that's what I kept saying. I kept saying to her, the baby is here. Yes. And she keeps saying, press. Press angapumi.
Oh, she press it in.
Press angapumi. Hey, angapumi. It's mina uyapuma.
Wow, what a moment.
Yeah. All my births are like that. All my kids have been like that. Very like dramaless. Drama filled, but short.
Instant.
No,
I was in labor for 8 hours.
Nah. And then, none of that. I don't have any of that. Kaya, it was the same thing. I started feeling the labor pains around 5 a.m. and I said to my husband, I think I'm in labor. And
I like how calm you are.
Yeah. And I said to him, I'm very quick.
No,
I'm very quick.
Yeah.
And I was having a home birth. So
that was planned.
Yeah, that was planned. So my last 2 births were home births. The boys were home births. I was having a home birth. Natural home. Push. Nothing. Oh. Yeah. Just me and the midwife.
Well done, man.
Yeah.
That's a thing of stars.
Yeah.
Because now we voila.
Yeah.
Like pome, vala, sharp.
And I respect women's decisions for that.
I'm not judging at all. I'm just saying...
It just feels like I am judging in the book because I bring it up.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I respect women's decisions to do that. And I have to put it on the record because maybe it doesn't come across in the book. I just think when the agenda is different for the medical fraternity, then we have to be careful because for doctors, it's a lot more convenient to put us straight in theater, cut us up, and take the baby out.
They can schedule it.
You know what I mean? We'll schedule...
meant to give birth this week.
Yeah.
Let's make it on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Imagine that. They determine the child's birthday
exactly.
even.
Exactly. You can, in fact, now you can choose. You can choose the date.
Yes.
Yeah. So if it's that week, which date do you feel?
Do you feel like? You
9. Uthanda 9. You're 9. Yeah. Ngoba nami ngumhla 9. Nayo ngumhla 9.
Star sign.
Yeah.
It's like so bani.
And you have to think deep about how that impacts on the divine order that we alter, that we mess with.
Because we know not what the purpose of this soul is to do here.
And the timing of his or her arrival.
Oh boy.
And we change things.
You see now, begumnandi.
Yeah, begumnandi. I'm sorry. Sengi deep. Bengisaxoxa ngalezi indaba zami zokuthetha ekhaya.
Wow, man.
Yeah.
And have you I use the word enjoy carefully because I maybe describe it wrong. Have you enjoyed motherhood?
Yes, I have. I sometimes think I enjoy being pregnant more than I do being a mom.
Really?
I love being pregnant.
Oh no, you might just make many kids.
I love being pregnant.
What about it do you love? It changes everything.
I don't know.
Does your name get bigger?
No.
Does your nose get bigger?
So I don't have all those issues of
Cravings?
nose. No, cravings, yeah. But I don't have the issues, not funny cravings, but like I don't have issues with excessive weight gain or a nose and feet and not being able to walk and all of that. Generally, my pregnancies are easy, and I'm grateful for that because I know there are a lot of women who don't have very easy pregnancies. But I just love being pregnant. I love being pregnant, and I love giving birth.
And you had to give birth.
I am weird.
The painful push all 3 times.
All 3 times. I mean, the last one, it was just me and the husband.
What?
Yeah. Because my midwife, Mrs. Pindi, kind of not miscalculated, but she thought, okay, I have 5 hours, so let me go home and come back.
Oh.
And she went home, and then 2 hours later, this one arrived.
Like the first one, like
the last.
Yeah.
She was like, so he is calling to say, hey, it's accelerating.
Yeah.
And she's like, okay. Oh, he couldn't get hold of her because I think she decided to take a nap or something like that, but couldn't get hold of her. But she was speeding, trying to come back. And by the time she arrived, the baby had arrived.
Did daddy manage?
Yeah, he's a doctor by profession.
Yes.
So he was able to, I mean, he kept saying, I've delivered so many babies, I didn't realize that I was preparing for this moment to deliver my own. I mean, the contractions were coming so fast and I'm on my bed and I couldn't speak because they were coming so fast. And I couldn't tell him that the head is out.
Right
like
now,
I can feel the head.
Yes.
Yeah. And so eventually I just tapped him like this to try and say, go and see. And he went there and he's like, whoa!
Wow.
And he was like, whoa! And he didn't have gloves, nothing. He went, the first thing he did was wash his hands.
Wash his hands, of course.
So went into the bathroom to wash his hands and came back. And as he was coming, I was already holding the head. Right.
And I can't believe you said you enjoy this.
In the moment, maybe I don't. But and I'm holding the head. And so I let go because he's here now. And then he swiftly pulled him out.
Wow.
And held him.
Must have been. How does he reflect on it?
It was such a special thing for him.
Yeah.
Because the first thing he said when he saw Mpilo, whom I'd already named by then, was, he looks like my father.
Whoa.
Oh my God. Utwana daddy.
Yes.
And he really looked like his grandfather.
Even at that tiny...
In that tiny state. Even now, he still smiles. He smiles like his grandfather. Especially when he's smiling or laughing. He's exactly like the grandfather.
Amazing.
And he said he looks like... And then I think for him... I mean, I still believe this as well. I think there was something there about him having to deliver this one. And I'd always been somebody who prays for the hands that will receive the baby first, because I know it's not my hands. And so when my previous midwife, so Sis Pindi was my second midwife, the midwife that I journeyed with almost to birth. I let go, terminated her services when I was 9 months.
Why did you?
There was an energy I wasn't feeling, and something in me, in my spirit, said she's not going to receive my baby.
Jeez, that was so close.
It was very close, and to try and find a new midwife would have been hard. We were attending Genesis, a private clinic in Parkhurst. Often midwives don't like taking over other people's cases. Yeah. And the funny thing is that when I'd gone to Genesis the first time and I saw all the midwives on the wall, like the pictures, I was very drawn to Sis Pindi. But I don't know, like something happened and we went with this one. But by the end of it, I knew then, and I said, when we go back, I just pray that we'll find this one.
You found her.
We found her, and
Yeah.
I phoned her, and she was a bit skeptical at first, but then she said she agreed, and she said to me, she agreed, but she doesn't really know why she agreed. Ordinarily, she wouldn't have.
Oh, because
It was a late one.
Yeah.
And so she became a part of that journey for us in the last 2 weeks and then giving birth.
Wow.
And she received Kaya, but she didn't receive Mpilo. Mpilo's dad received Mpilo, and then was placed on me until Sispindi came to do the rest of everything.
Amazing.
Yeah.
You make me want to be a dad. You do, man. You make it sound so cool.
I love being pregnant.
You love being pregnant.
I love babies. I love that nurturing, that mothering, that I love it.
You considered abortion
Yes, I did.
of your child.
Yeah.
Surely that was a difficult decision to make.
Yeah.
And you decided not to. What led you to not doing it? Because you went in, sat down with a doctor.
I went in, I did my research, got a couple of girls who said, I got somebody who can sort this out for you. And I thought, okay, went to the doctor, and I walked in, sat, told him I was pregnant.
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing the conversation,
Yeah.
but said to him, I want to terminate.
He kept on calling you Aya. That's why I remember.
Yes. He said to him, it's funny because I actually tried to track him down a few years ago.
Okay.
His practice wasn't there anymore.
Why did you need to
I wanted to thank him.
I
wanted to thank him because he changed my mind, and I don't know why. He had performed other abortions for other girls, and that's why I was referred to him.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm X weeks and I want to have an abortion, which was hard. And he said, okay. And he said, let's check how far you are.
Yeah.
And then he put me on the bed and he did the whole scan thing.
Yeah.
And he kept that scanner on me long enough for me to change my mind.
To see the...
Yeah, and he explained, so this is the head and this is
Wow.
the dondon, and he said, do you see that that's your baby? And I didn't understand what he was doing. But when I reflected on it much later, I understood that for some reason I'd come to this man and something in him had said, he can't do this.
Not this one.
Not this one.
Yeah.
And we sat down after all of that, and he said, do you still want to go ahead? And I wasn't sure, and he convinced me not to. And he kept saying to me, what is it that you're scared of? And I said, it's going to be hard. Mom's a single parent, and I can't do this. I got
what
to
is
continue.
it you're hard about keeping?
Yes. What is going to be so hard about keeping the parent? I said, Mom's single parent. I can't do this. I'm literally just graduating. I'm in my graduate year. Yeah. I'm about to start work. I can't have a baby now. And then he was just trying to convince me. He said, think about it. And I remember his words. I write this in the book. He said, this time you have to face the music.
Yes.
And then he said, this time next year, things will be different. And I held on to that. And there are times when I go through really difficult times in my life, and I go back, those words will ring when I feel like, oh, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. This is too hard. This time next year, things will be different.
I want to connect 2 moments in your life as we conclude, because there's a lot more in this book.
Yeah.
You know what? Is it still available for sale?
Yeah, it is available for sale.
How many copies are available now? How many thousand copies are available at shops?
Oh, I don't know, but...
Because people should go get it.
People should just... I mean, it's been on the shelves for 3 years. This is year 3. And it's still selling.
Okay. Here it is.
Yeah. Just ask for it. They'll order it. If it's not in stock, they'll order it.
Yeah.
If they can't find it, they can DM me and we can arrange.
Make a plan.
Yeah.
I say this because there's just no way I can cover all of it.
Yeah.
Uba Ucheri Mfokeng, I hosted him in this very room.
He did our marriage counseling.
I'm aware.
Oh, you are.
That's why I'm bringing this together.
Oh.
He said with me, and I said to him, Tatem Fugeng, I tried to read your book. I read at least 80%. But there's no way I will sit here with you and talk about the whole 100%. It's too much, yes. Because the subject matter is about being a man.
A man.
And how to recognize yourself as a man and what role you play. And I remember when I saw his name in this, and I said, okay, I'm glad I found his name. Then he makes me realize that there's no way I'll finish this. Thanks for the reminder. Tell me about how I'm bringing the two worlds together. Borotho family and your learnings as a girl growing up, becoming.
Mm-hmm.
What have you found that shocked you instantly about now becoming a wife? Because that's not an easy transition for anybody. What was the easiest part for you, or the most difficult part, or both?
Such a complex question.
Do your best. I ask complex questions.
It's a complex question. Intelligent, academic, don't who ask you.
Let me unacademicize it. What shocked you about the Borotho family and what you believe? What you've always believed and you found it. And I asked this because the church thing was one of them, I imagine. What else you walked in and said, does wives expected to do this?
I think it would be uncouth of me to speak about my in-laws and whatever flaws
That's 100%.
they may have.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make a general observation. Church is good because it can ground you. It can you find some sense, some solace of belonging in church, right? But I sometimes think that over-churching things and over-religializing things or over-spiritualizing things doesn't give us liberty or permission to be accountable with self. Because it's always somewhere in the spirit. It's always spiritual.
It's not you.
Yeah. And so I think what I find with a lot of families that are deeply religious is a sense of unaccountability and being unreal in a real world. It's like we're not imaginary anything here. You are here, I'm here, let's talk.
And there's no, right here in this conversation, we acknowledge God, but there's no supernatural power.
Yes.
That will determine this conversation.
Yes.
Let's have it.
Yeah. It's like you're not gonna call Jesus.
You can't pray it away.
Pray it away. You say sorry. Let's move.
100%.
So that's been my experience with families or people who are so deeply identify so much with just Jesus, Holy Spirit, and God. And I'm about God, I'm for God. I just think that when it starts to remove accountability and responsibility, it becomes toxic.
That's an interesting one.
It becomes really toxic. Yeah. And I come from a family that naturally confronts issues.
Not give credit to a force. Right now,
here,
let's
solve.
Yeah.
What's the issue? Let's talk. We have a family group. We have a family group. We have everything and anything is spoken about.
Yeah. Even God.
Yes. And even our differences in beliefs. There are some who don't believe Jesu. There are some who do. There are some who believe in God only. And we have conversations and then talk about, how are we going to manage this thing, because we're doing maybe this event or we're doing this or we're doing that. So how we actually talk.
Yeah.
Right? Because all of us have to come into this one common space with our different beliefs and we've got to make it work. Right? And I'm naturally a confrontational person, but the word confrontation has so many negative connotations.
I agree.
And I feel like, actually it's positive. It's a positive word that's been given a negative stereotype.
The way they are.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, I want to talk about it and move on.
I must tell you though, I have a negative perspective of the word.
Okay.
Confrontation.
Okay.
And that's why when you say it and you're saying you're a confrontational person, I felt myself seeing the negative. And then you immediately said, but wait, this is not all this word is.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm glad you did that to me as well.
Yeah. And I used to be like that because for a long time I was told that my confrontational nature was unacceptable. It's that whole thing about girls not being opinionated, or if you're opinionated, then you're aggressive. If you speak your truth, then you're disrespectful. And so for me, it was around that whole narrative. And I grew up feeling like, you know, I can't voice my opinion or, you know, what I truly think without being told I'm fighting.
Yes. And why ulwa?
Yeah, why ulwa? And so it's become quite an irritation and a trigger for me when people say that, because it's like, no, but I'm talking about the subject matter. And people are so not used to confronting issues. That's why there's so much brokenness. There's so many of us who are in live bodies but walking around with broken bones and dead souls because we don't confront issues. And we allow them to eat into our spirit, into our souls, and we become a cancer unto ourselves because we don't.
When you're a cancer, you're not only a cancer to you.
Yeah.
You're a cancer to everybody too.
Else. Yeah.
You know when they say toxic people make other people also toxic.
Yeah. True.
The positive spin. What's your favorite thing about being married?
It's an interesting question because of where I am in my marriage. For me, which may not necessarily have always been the case, the favorite thing, I think I feel like I'm answering a question that says, what should be the favorite thing about being married?
You decide.
Is owning a newness or a start to a journey that is not linked to anybody else, to anything you've ever been taught, to anything else that anybody will feed into this. But as somebody who's now been accepted into society as an adult who can make their own decisions, being able to rewrite your story. Because I think marriage gives us that opportunity. But because of everything that is the stereotype that is outside of us, that feeds into that, we're often unable to do that for ourselves.
Yeah.
But actually, marriage gives us permission to start again.
Wow. Why do you see it that way? Because my very naive perspective says you've been with this person. Why does marriage become a crunch? Well,
marriage doesn't start on the day that you get married, right? So it starts when you start dating, and then eventually the marriage part of it is the formalization of formalizing the process. And I see it like that because it's that commitment that you now make to this thing that you're building together. Yeah. And building is beautiful. Building is beautiful because out of nothing, anything can happen. Out of nothing, anything can happen. And the other beautiful thing about that is that I have control and you have control.
That's true.
Over this thing.
Yeah.
And actually, nobody else outside of this has control over this unless we give them control and power over it.
We open the doors.
We open those doors.
And they walk in.
Yeah. But it can be anything we want it to be. And that's the beauty about marriage.
What is it, besides the doors, what is it that determines its success? Besides, because the doors contribute to failure. But what could easily determine its success? So you know, I'm trying to learn here.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if you should be learning from me.
Do you know one thing I've learned? I need to learn from people who've experienced something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's... who else do I ask? My mom has given me the most important reason why marriage is not such a bad idea. Because for the longest time, I said, nah, man, it doesn't even cross my mind. Until she said, it gives you a north. There's something about a north that you as a man need. Because you can be scattered. If you are left alone without anyone saying, you... And I can testify to that as a man. a young man, you all over the place.
Yeah.
And I mean all over the place, literally, in so many ways. Your finances are a mess. You're not organized. Your dreams are all over the place. There is a goal, but it's all over the place. There's every girl looks interesting. All of that. Then there's a whoa, because there's this girl now in front of you that looks far more interesting than any of them. And when she gave me that reason, I said, okay, you're old, but you're wise.
I like your mom.
You're old and wise.
I like your mom.
Yes.
And I think to add and bring the 2 points together, what mom said and what I was saying about the newness, we have so much potential to change the world. I think often when we talk about change and changing the world, we often look at big things like being on big stages. You have to be on platforms like this. You have to be on TV with an audience of when we talk about change. And so people feel like they're not impactful enough if they are not afforded those platforms.
Yeah.
In a space like marriage where you're given an opportunity to start your own tribe, which feeds into a society, you have so much control of the kind of change you want to impact in the world by virtue of how you show up in your family.
That's true.
For yourself, for your wife, for your children. And that causes a ripple effect that then changes the world. And so often when I talk about changing the world, I'm like, we don't change the world just on big stages. And sometimes it's not impactful enough. But the real change is the change that we're able to influence in our spheres of influence, in our little corners, with our little families, that then becomes the ripple effect for the kind of society that we want to see.
That's
so
important.
it's important. And there's a seed to that.
It almost looks like a small perspective, but yet it has such global results. In that tribe, you could raise someone who's going to save the world. In whatever form, you could be guiding a soul that's going to determine so many things in the future.
Exactly. And so when you ask me the question, what is required for a successful marriage? Not just for a successful marriage, for a successful partnership or family, I think it's the comprehension that it's not about me, that it's bigger than me. You've got to be able to remove yourself from outside the equation because there are certain sacrifices that will require you to do that.
True. And in a marriage, that's when they're facing you right straight. And it's hard to do that. They're saying, are you going to do your nails or stay at home? That tiny moment. Yeah. It's am I gonna, and I think that's why so many women find it difficult to leave marriage, even when it's been toxic, because there's a voice of love that compels you to stay for your children. Because there's an understanding, even if it's not dissected properly, of it's not just about me, but there's other people I have to think about. And that can be tricky. Do you find men find it easier to leave in using that context? Because you were deliberate in choosing a woman in your example. Do you find men leave a little easier? I don't think all of them. Yeah. So it's again, got to contextualize it, because it's like, not all of you are the same. You're not the same. That's true. I've met many good men, good men. And I advocate for good men. But I do think we have created an environment that makes it easier for men to leave. So it's not easier for us to leave. It's a societal issue. Again, it's a societal issue. Yeah. Or even if it's not just the only thing, but a big part of it is a societal issue. Because you see, when we are hluleka emendweni, awubizwa ngomabuya emendweni. If the marriage fails, I take a big portion of the blame as the female, as the woman, not you. No. Not you. So society makes it easier for men to leave. Yeah. It doesn't necessarily mean that men want to leave. But because society makes it easier. Yeah. But it is easier for men to leave. You said because of where you are in your marriage. Are you willing to tell us? There's a lot that I'm reevaluating. I think I ain't David. I need to start it like that. Your problem, David. King I am a daughter.
It's important to understand that we're evolving beings.
Both men and women.
Both men and women.
Yeah.
And in the journey of evolution, we constantly have to be communicating about where we are. Because I'm not the same woman you married 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Neither am I the same woman you married 5 years ago or even 2 years ago. And in the vacuum of non-communication, it can be difficult to find each other when one has evolved so much on their own.
Sure.
And that is why when journeys of evolution begin, or they're constant. So we've constantly got to be informing each other about where we are in our lives. Because namhlanje uzongithola ngumzalwane ungishade. Kusasa sengine concept of African spirituality.
Now young
And when young mangas, but because we're not having the conversation in bed about, hey, Sando Samyazi, ngimzwile usibani mane khuluma, and what are your thoughts?
Interesting, yes.
It's very interesting. And we debate and we talk and we, there's an assumption that you are where I married you.
Or we are moving together.
And that is
if there's any movement.
If there's any movement, correct.
Yeah.
And that can be very dangerous. That is very dangerous.
You seem to suggest that you overcome that through conversation, constant conversation. It sounds like the obvious solution.
I don't know what the overall solution is.
Yeah.
But I think certainly a default solution that doesn't seem too far-fetched or impossible is communication.
Yeah.
Because then I get into your head. I can't get into your head without talking to you.
No.
There's no way I'm going to guess. I'm not some prophet who's going to guess about, like, this is where you are now. Yeah, when we're not moving together, even on issues of decisions that were made and how those decisions have affected me and how I view you, sometimes you build up resentment over things that were decisions that were made that you felt you were disregarded, your feelings were not taken into account, and you move along with it because that thing was not communicated.
You just carry on. And you are now, because you're not also communicating.
You're also not communicating because there's no culture of communication, which is why I think the companionship, the friendship is even more important than that we're married.
Then I think a lot of people lose that then over time, because when relationships start, when this is just my very innocent observation, there's a lot of happiness and conversation. And then there's a moment where it filters into a seriousness that drops. Because some of those conversations are introduced in a fun, happy moment in the beginning. But when we go, we funnel through a serious state of reality where it's about the administrative stuff.
Yeah.
The fun is less.
Yes.
Unless we force it and we go to a holiday. Even that, we are forcing this and we end up at a holiday, but there's still no conversation. When upumile nabantwana niye shopping, mina ngihlezi la ngibheka TV at a hotel, for example. And that happens and it continues and the conversations are no longer fun. So there's no room to lighten serious conversations. Every time they come to the table, they are serious.
And they're hard. And they're like deeply engaging. And sometimes we're really just tired. We don't want to do this. We don't. But that's why if you've made the commitment, you've got to put in the effort. You've got to put in the effort. Marriage is a business.
That's one.
You got to run it like you run a business.
Yeah.
If you're going to neglect it, you better recognize that business is going to fail. It's going to crash.
You're going to experience losses.
You're going to experience losses.
Yeah. You're neglecting
it's a business. It's a business. And I think sometimes, no, not even sometimes, often we take it for granted that the people who are in our lives are just going to be there forever. And I'm glad that the landscape and the temperament of women when it comes to what we accept is changing, in that we're more upfront about our expectations. This is what I expect, and this is how I want to be treated, and this is what I want. I'm glad that those conversations are happening, and that we can hold each other accountable for what we agreed to. And it's important to be consistent with it. Someone was saying to me the other day, you let men get away with the small stuff, or let your partner get away, not even just men. You let your partner get away with the small stuff, you sure as hell guaranteed that he's going to get away with the big stuff.
Yeah.
So don't neglect the small stuff. And that's the thing. We get tired of saying the same thing over and over and over again. Say it over and over again until it sticks. If it means you're not speaking to him for a month because he didn't call you.
I'm afraid
Agabuyi, or he didn't call you. I expect you to call me.
Yeah.
And that's an expectation that I'm not afraid to put on the table. And if it's too much for you, then tell me so I can find somebody who does.
Yeah.
Right? So hold each other accountable to the small stuff.
Wow, man. Jeez. You've empowered us.
Thank you.
I wonder if you're aware. You're like, you're this ball of lessons and education and
Please
power.
don't say that, because then I get scared to come to interviews. I was saying to me, my manager, before coming here, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so scared because, then there's this expectation. And I suppose there's also self-imposed expectation. But I talk about it in the book as well, that
You've created this.
I've created it, but I don't want to be held to it, because I just have my own truth to talk about. And
you're happy to express.
Yeah. I'm happy to express my own story and my own journey, but I don't know everything.
No. For me, it's the innocence of your approach to it. You can tell that, and I'll tell you what happens, and maybe you're not aware, because I'm sitting here and watching you.
Okay.
You pause and you look up and you reflect. That means you even recognize that you have to think about this. It's not, and I see the paging through your mind, and you bring it up, and it's brilliant. Like, man, I can't believe she said it that way. So that's it's for me. That is for me the secret to your sauce. It's the, wait a minute, let me think about this for a second, and I think you reflect on whether it's your experiences, the conversations you've had, because you said it, we are the sum total of our experiences, and our experiences are conversations, experiences are the books we read, the experiences are the things we've engaged, experiences are the pain we felt, and how we overcame it. And then you're able to then say, if I put this and put this and put this together, this is actually not a bad thing. And I see your brain do that.
Yeah.
So that's why I say, don't stop, man. Teach more.
Thank you.
I wonder if you're aware that you need to teach more.
I am.
Yeah.
I think I am. There's an insecurity linked to that. But I think I am.
It. You're delaying us here. No, seriously. No, seriously.
They've been trying to have me, Tuli and the team have been trying to get me to do talks, and
I think you should. And overcome insecurity by rehearsing. And overcome insecurity and you're an actress. You know this world better than me.
Yeah.
I go on stage every day for in 3 hours. You have no idea the anxiety I go through. People don't even realize that.
Yeah, that's true.
And I get over it every day.
Yeah.
And it's tomorrow again. You overcome anxiety, you overcome all of those insecurities by saying, all right, what is the subject? Let's research it. Let me master its presentation. And has anyone done it? I can do better.
Yeah.
I can do better. That's what it is. So that's why I say you should teach more. I've interviewed almost over 100 people here. I don't call them interviews because they're conversations. This has been my favorite.
Really?
And I've never said that. I always say, wow, that was fun. I like that. And then I'll call a friend of mine and say, oh, that was nice. And this one has been my favorite. And also because I judged it. No, because I judged it so much before. And I remember, I don't know who I spoke. Oh, I was speaking to Shakes here at the office. I said, man, this thing is putting me in a bad mood and I don't like it. I don't know how I'm going to do the interview.
Yeah.
I called Ineo. I wanted to say, can we move this lady? I can't talk to her. And I'll tell you, man, your openness is beautiful, man. Teach our young girls, teach our young boys. And don't only empower the girls. I worry about boys a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
I worry about the neglect. Because they're going to marry you guys. They're going to marry your daughters. And will they be ready? They're going to hijack you. They're going to rob your house. They're likely to do it way more than girls are likely to do. What are we doing to look after them while we are empowering everybody else? And that concerns me greatly.
So, if I can just have my 2 cents, because
Please.
I know we're closing. I spoke at a couple of International Women's Day events in March. And the theme for International Women's Day this year was embracing equity.
Okay.
And I felt like, when I looked at this theme, even in my opening talk, was as I was preparing, I realized that actually I'd been very frustrated over the years when we talk about equality, because sikela phezulu.
Yeah.
We talk about equality and neglect everything else that's gotten us to this place. And so for the first time, I felt like when we address equity, because equity speaks to understanding the oppression of those who are left behind, so that you can understand what your privilege is and what your part is, and then saying, this is how you can help me close this gap.
True.
Because I spoke or facilitated a dialogue some years ago. It was Youth Month. It was Nasrec, thousands of kids who were bused in from high school and different high schools, that is. And a young boy stood up and said, yeah, but Mama, I have a problem with this, because a lot of the issues that were being addressed were about girls. He said, I have a problem with this because everything is about girls. And nobody's talking about us to us. And I responded to him. I think my response could have been better. But what I was trying to say to him is that we have to address the injustice in order to be able to say, how do we move on? And so that moment for me made me understand 2 things. One, that when we are privileged, even equality feels like an injustice. And that's not my quote. Somebody said that.
Yeah.
But also that we're really dealing with a generation of men and boys and men who honestly don't understand our journey. And that's why writing the book, for me, now I understand that as much as it empowers women, it is exactly what men need to walk in our experiences, in our lived experiences. Because part of the challenge is that we have not been able to articulate strongly enough, well enough, what women have gone through.
Gotcha.
And why we're placed at that disadvantage.
Yeah.
And so when we start talking about equity, we don't have a choice. We don't have a choice but to address the injustice, that this is what the oppression looks like at every stage of my life. You don't have periods. I do. And when we talk about period poverty in this country, we're talking about over 7 million girls in this every year who aren't able to attend school for an average of 90 days per annum, because they don't have access to sanitary pads. But we have condoms everywhere. Our priorities are skewed. And so when you start detailing it in that manner and walk the journey with men, we start to shift the paradigm. And all we can do at this stage as women is have the conversation with men in the room. And so in the corporates where we're speaking, I would applaud them for bringing the men into the room, because as our allies, they have to understand what the injustice is, because men don't get what the injustice is. They don't get it because they've never lived our lived experiences and our reality.
Absolutely.
And so when we bring them on the journey, they get to understand it. And Tuli will tell you, the men that have stood up in those conversations have said, thank you for articulating it in that way, because for the first time, I get to understand what it is like to be my mother, to be my sister, to be you, for the first time, I get to understand it. Before, nobody's ever told me. And that's why I said the equality conversation for me, siyapapa, suke sesikude kakhulu. We have to talk about what the injustice looks like, where we are. And I have to walk that journey with you and hope that it creates some kind of paradigm shift in you to understand where I am, so that you can align yourself with my mission and what it is that we are trying to do.
100%.
Because for as long as you don't see it that way, you're always going to see yourself as the victim too. But the truth of the matter is, we're on the back burner here, guys. Like, there's so much that we've been disempowered from, disadvantaged of, so much, years and years and years that we have to undo to get to a place of equality with you. But it's going to take us working together. And I get that now.
I say this because I can never experience periods. As a result, my lived experience will never match yours. Yours will never match mine. I can only listen to it and do the best to appreciate it and understand it. And beyond that, it's largely part of your role to help me understand it. Yeah. So that's why the commonality of our minds is so important for us as men to say, I'm a willing participant. Because it's easy for me to say, angila. You know, imagine in the meetings or those presentations you've had where men who said, nah, I'm not coming. You know, if they were given the option, like, it's not for me, this thing. It's to empower women. I'm not a woman, so I get nothing from it. So there must be a willing participant. And I guess it starts with getting us to be interested.
Yeah.
It's really that. But I always say, once I look at the world and understand, because no man has no women around them, whether it's your mother, your sister, your kids, whatever it is, there must be some women around you. So for us to be able to see this from our sister's perspective, from our cousins, from our aunts, maybe we'll understand it better. But it goes back to that relationship question that says, if we don't talk, nothing will happen. We'll achieve nothing.
Yeah.
I'll assume, we've been dealing with empowerment of women for 30 years. By now, they should be fine.
Yeah.
The same way white people are saying, how? You've been in power for so long and you're still complaining about apartheid. So it's exactly that. It's the continuous conversations.
Yeah.
Help us help each other.
Yeah.
Wow, man.
With you there.
I'm
with you there.
I loved this.
Thank you for having me.
Wow, man. Thank you. And thanks for writing this. Give me a reason to read something.
Give me a reason to write something.
It did. Because I postponed reading books and I end up reading 3 at the same time. Like one chapter there, one chapter. So this one forced me to keep going. I didn't even talk about the cheating. Go check it out in the book. It's so interesting. In the middle of all of this, you kept on saying, and she has such a nice body. She's talking about the girl whom the boyfriend cheated with. And she has such a nice body.
And I'm pregnant.
You mentioned it maybe 3 times. You complaining, and you pause. And she has such a nice body.
She really did.
She did.
Yeah, she
Small.
did.
Her name is
Small. Yeah, she's the only. She's one of the original names.
Really? It's her real name.
That's her real name.
Wow.
That's what they called her. But also, I mean, Small was a dip in the ocean, honestly.
Yeah.
Because he had cheated on me so many times.
I guess Small is when you caught him.
Yeah. When I caught him. And that's what changed. That's what changed the game.
Wow, man.
Is the catching him.
I must tell you, he could have gotten away with it. It was the phone.
It was the phone. The phone gave it away. Because I was like, he doesn't leave his phone.
He could have gotten away with it.
And when I saw that, I was like,
He's here.
He's in this house.
Amazing. This is playing like a movie. When you said, Ula, Ukona.
And he's in that room. And that's locked. The friend's room.
Outside.
Because he's outside. And then it makes sense. Like, why isn't the friend going into his room?
I must tell you, though, they really applied their mind, you know? If you think about it. Because they thought, no, man, don't lock your room. Lock your friend's room. Lock yourself inside the friend's room. And say the friend is not here. He locked his stuff in so they're safe. I thought, it's chance you're going somewhere here.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, no, it was a clean getaway until that phone was discovered.
And you said he never leaves his phone. He's here. Anyway, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. God bless you.
Please call.
Yabonga.
I wish you well.
I wish you well.
Wow, man. I wish you all your communications projects may they not be government. Been there.
Been there, done that.
May they not be government.
Funny, a lot of them are private.
Yeah. It's peaceful. Thank you. Take care.
Ngiyabonga.
Wow. This time next year. Things will be different.
Look at you.
Take care. It's Ayanda
Thank
Borotho,
you.
everybody.
Ngiyabonga.
Take care.
King David Studio Podcast.